Hey now, we're live and I just dropped the book. Yeah, we got it. All right. Hey now. What a way to start stream. Hey now. All right, we are live, or we should be live, across 2 platforms. Let's check. Quite seeing myself on Twitch yet. Quite seeing that. I mean, there might be more of a delay because it's. Oh, there it goes. Okay. Let me bring up YouTube. It looks like it's working. Oh, there it goes. Okay. The stream delay is greater when you're streaming to multiple platforms, unfortunately. But there we go. But hey now, we're going to be reading The Return of the King today. We're going to be continuing along with that. I did not get to stream last Thursday. And that's a whole story. I'll get into that later. Yeah. So I have the book, and like almost the very first thing that happened is I dropped it on the ground. But let me go ahead and get the word out that we're live here. Now, it's giving me the bit rate problem here. Giving me the red bit rate on... it's giving me the red bit rate on Twitch. Telling me 4,500. Not bad. Yeah, it's telling me unstable. I might have to grab Alice and lab that out a little bit to see that if I could improve the issue there. Hey Ted. Because Twitch is doing that thing again where it's giving me that, oh, your stream's unstable, which it only does when I'm streaming to more than one place at a time. And I had that problem licked, but it seems to have come back. So there's that. But we're gonna go ahead. If we have any issues, I could just switch over to just YouTube, but hopefully we don't have those issues. But I'm gonna definitely have to like say pull Alice aside at one point and say, hey, could you help me lab out those issues again? Because there was a few settings that I had to change, and we might have to change those settings again. I don't know. But either way, we are going to be reading The Return of the King today. And the last time that I streamed this, we read, I believe, The Muster of Rohan. Yeah, because we did The Passing of the Grey Company. Now I'm not sure. Did we do The Muster of Rohan? I feel like we did. Yeah, I think we did. Yeah, we definitely did. I remember doing it. So that means we're going to go to chapter 4, which is the Siege of Gondor, which means we're going to catch up with Pippin. The first bit of The Return of the King sort of alternates between the two, you know? Here. Yeah, the Siege of Gondor. Yeah, that's what I thought. Because the first chapter, being Minas Tirith, is following Pippin, and then the second chapter is the passing of the Grey Company. Well, that actually, that goes to Aragorn, actually. But then when we come back to the Hobbits, with the Muster of Rohan is following Merry, and then we're going to go to Pippin for the Siege of Gondor. And after that is, of course, the Ride of the Rohirrim, which follows Merry. And then the Battle of the Pelennor Fields. Now, the Battle of the Pelennor Fields is interesting because it follows Pippin. And you would think, well, Merry's the one that's actually out on the field. Well, it follows both of them, actually. It sort of switches halfway through. The Pyre of Denethor, that's a Pippin. Houses of Healing, that's Merry. even though they're together at that point. It's following Merry. The last debate. At that point, I think, all the characters are together, so you could really say, well, which one really was the person that was relaying the information to Frodo later? Was it Merry? Was it Pippin? Was it Aragorn? Who knows, right? Maybe when we get to that chapter, we'll talk about that issue a little bit more. Then we have the Black Gate opens. That certainly is a Pippin chapter. And then we go into book 6. And what's interesting about book 6 is that I would make the argument that the entirety of book 6 is told from Sam's perspective. And I think that, like, even partly through the Two Towers, when we were following both Frodo and Sam, that there was a point where it sort of stopped following Frodo and started following Sam, and you would wonder, well, it doesn't really matter that much because they're together, right? They don't really ever separate. But where it's important is that there are moments where Frodo is asleep and it follows Sam, but there's no moments where it's the opposite, where Sam is sleeping. If Sam's sleeping, there's no narrative, It just goes to him waking up. Which is interesting because everybody likes to attribute almost the entire book to Frodo. And certainly he was the one that physically wrote it down in the Red Book of Westmarch. But as for, who was actually relaying it to him, like, a lot of times I think Sam was relaying it to him. And I believe it's because, the closer, even before entering Mordor, even really, I would say before entering Ithilien, Frodo is very preoccupied with the ring. So he's, I think later on when he's sitting and writing this all down in the comfort of his own home and making a story out of it, I think a lot of times he would have to ask Sam, what exactly did that place look like, Sam? Could you describe it to me? Or, what exactly happened? I don't really remember all that well. It's all sort of a blur, I think something like that may have happened. I'd be surprised if it didn't. I really would. And it's okay to do that. It's okay to suppose things like that. It's okay to make surmise. We enter the realm of surmise, which is a realm in our minds, and it has its own borders, and it has its own laws and customs, and as long as we observe where the borders are and what the laws and the customs of the realm of surmise are, I think that you're doing well. I mean, even Tolkien surmised on his own work. One of the most famous, or perhaps if you're of the mind to say infamous examples of such, is when he was asked what happened to the Entwives, and he said that he did not know, but that he fears they may have all died. He's not saying definitively that they all died. He's saying that based on the information that he has, that's the logical conclusion that he would come to. And that's one of those instances where it's actually perfectly okay to disagree with him if you wish to, you could say, well, he says he fears they may have died, but he didn't say it definitively, and I would like to believe that they lived and that this is what they're doing, and that's where you take the role of sub-creator and you start, making a headcanon or perhaps even fan fictions based on, the legendarium of the Lord of the Rings. Oh, there you have it. I wanted to check something on my phone. Where? Oh, that's right over here. Let's see. Oh, I never got I said I was going to get the word out that we're live, and I never actually did that. Let me. You did get the copy of the Silmarillion, meaning that you have it in your hands or that you ordered it? ordered it. Okay. I noticed that Amazon is rather quick with delivering books recently. I had oh darn, I had ordered a copy of this book here of Beren and Luthien. No, that's not Beren and Luthien. That's Children of Húrin. I grabbed the wrong thing. That's on me. Is the right one? I ordered a copy of Beren and Luthien for Wayne as a thank you for doing all the narration for the play that we put on that Matt wrote, and I wanted to get him this exact copy, but they don't. Apparently, they don't sell this one anymore, so it's a slightly different copy. And I ordered that on I want to say it was Monday, and it said that it would arrive on Thursday. But then the next morning, which was Tuesday, it said it was arriving today, and that's why I said to Wayne on the Discord, I said, "Hey, it might be coming today." All right, let me finish this message that I'm sending so that I don't miss out on anything here. Where's my YouTube chat? I seem to have lost my YouTube chat. Oh, there it is. Hey there, Joe Quake. How's it going? Frodo gives the red book to Sam with chapter 80 unfinished. If you count all the chapters starting with The Hobbit, that means Sam began writing the story in the Scouring chapter. Okay, so, but the point that I'm making is that Frodo was the one physically writing in the book, meaning that it was his handwriting. But there is a lot of The Two Towers and The Return of the King that is exclusively from Samwise's perspective. So even though he's not authoring that, I feel like they had a lot of bull sessions where, Frodo would have said, and then what happened? And then he would write that down, Amazon said it would be here on Tuesday, but who knows when it will. Yeah, it's interesting because, and by the way, for those of you watching on YouTube, on the Twitch side, Ted is saying hi to all of you. Okay, let me finish this message though. I keep forgetting that I was trying to get the word out that we're live. So it's not really who's actually right, because in that case, Frodo wrote almost all of the book, right? But not all of it was from his perspective. For example, he wasn't there with Merry and Pippin. He wasn't there with Aragorn. A lot of that had to be relayed to him. But even the stuff that he was there for was almost certainly relayed by Sam. And if you pay attention as we read, not today because we're not going to be anywhere near Frodo and Sam today, but as we read through book 6 when we get to it, you'll see that Sam is the focal character and actually has been the focal character for quite some time. All right, here now that I've done that, let me check what I was going to check. See, I'm not even on the right account here. Let's switch that over here. Okay, view channel. Okay. Okay. I love the messages because I wanted to see if I had any messages from the post that I made early this afternoon when I said that we will be live and we will be doing the Return of the King, because I did not get to do that last week because I was feeling very ill. And Laurel was telling me, glad you're feeling better. And Dylan, who is our lovely YouTube moderator, said, so no orcs. This is pleasing news. And there are, in fact, no orcs in this chapter, actually. Well, I guess they're out there in the periphery, but we don't interact with them. Yeah, so last week, I wanted to do this stream last week, and it was scheduled. And what happened, unfortunately, was that morning, I woke up extremely early at about 6 o'clock in the morning, and I was in a lot of pain. And I had to go to the bathroom very badly, and I won't give you all the, the grisly details because who wants all that? But I will say that I was feeling very, very poorly, And even then, I still made a post saying that I was going to be live that night because I thought, well, it's just a reading stream. I can do that. And I even said, hey, I might cut it short or, because I'm not feeling well. But then I realized there's no way. There's no way. It would be very foolish to try to stream in the condition that I was in. And so I canceled it. And we were actually today, we were not going to be doing a reading stream. We were going to do a gaming stream. We were going to play that, quite lovely Two Towers game that I've been enjoying, and we've all been enjoying picking through that and sort of like looking at the lore in that. But I thought, well, as fun as that is, the reading streams are actually to me more fun. So let's get that done, right? Let's play makeup. There won't be a YouTube stream next week on Thursday because I have something else going on for Twitch. But in 2 weeks we should be back with the Council of Tolkien, and that would be, of course, that's July 2nd. I do have to speak with Sid to see if he's going to be there. The plan was that he would be returning to the Council of Tolkien for July, but I know that he has had some health challenges himself, so I have to make sure that he's going to be okay to do that, because if not, I would, of course, ask Laurel. Actually, speaking of which, let me text Laurel right now and let her know that I'm live, because I know she doesn't like to miss these. Well, well, she knew that she knows, but I'll still text her. Where is you? Where are you, Laurel? I don't see you here. Jesse. Oh, here she is. Okay, there we go. That's taken care of. So yeah, that's why also, just to let you guys know, for those of you that are following the channel, that episode 157, which if you're a member, you might have seen it already. It came out yesterday. If you're not a member, it comes out next Wednesday. That's a bit of a shorter episode because of how ill I was and how terrible everything was. I didn't actually get to do as much writing as I would have liked to. As a matter of fact, Thursdays are a big writing day for me as it is. So I didn't really get to do that. Okay, well, let's maybe get started. I'm gonna switch over to here. There we go. And I'm gonna put that over there so I can see the YouTube chat. Okay. All right, let's so to catch everybody up for the Return of the King. So we haven't been following Frodo and Sam for the beginning. We had Gandalf and Pippin. They went to Minas Tirith, which is the capital city in Gondor, and they are preparing for the fact that Sauron is going to attack Gondor. Aragorn, along with Gimli and Legolas, the sons of Elrond, and a bunch of Dunedain Rangers, have headed into the Paths of the Dead. We left them going into the Paths of the Dead, going through it, but we have not caught up with them just yet. And Merry has been hanging out with King Theoden in Rohan in sort of like the aftermath of the Battle of Helm's Deep. But now Rohan is mustering, or they have mustered, and they are going to ride off to war against Sauron to assist Gondor. The problem is they wanted to leave Merry behind, but a young fellow named Dernhelm has scooped him up and is taking him along, and that's sort of where we left him. Of course, we know that Dernhelm is Éowyn because, well, we've read the book before, or perhaps we've seen the film. But Merry doesn't know that. And as a matter of fact, what's really interesting is that the first-time reader who has not seen the films is not going to know that Dernhelm is Éowyn. They're not going to know that. Tolkien actually keeps it under wraps until the moment where she doesn't do the thing that she does in the film. She doesn't whip the helmet off, and you see her. Even then, you already knew it was her. That was just a reveal specifically to the Witch King. Mary knew it was her like instantly. The viewer knew it was her instantly. But in the book, as will she just actually says who she is. I don't want any AI viewers, no. So you can just we're just gonna banish this bot into the fires of Mount Doom. Goodbye. Cast him into the fire. So we're starting with chapter 4, which is the Siege of Gondor. So if you're following along, it's page 788. Pippin was roused by Gandalf. Candles were lit in their chamber, for only a dim twilight came through the windows. The air was heavy, as with approaching thunder. "What is the time?" said Pippin, yawning. "Past the second hour," said Gandalf. "Time to get up and make yourself presentable. You are summoned to the lord of the city to learn your new duties." "And will he provide breakfast?" "No, I have provided it, all that you will get till noon. Food is now doled out by order." Pippin looked ruefully at the small loaf and he thought very inadequate pat of butter which was set out for him beside a cup of thin milk. "Why did you bring me here?" he said. "You know quite well," said Gandalf. "To keep you out of mischief. And if you do not like being here, you can remember that you brought it on yourself." Pippin said no more. So, of course, what he's referring to is the fact that Pippin took the Palantir from him as he slept and accidentally contacted Sauron. And of course, I point out that, Gandalf is being a little stern and he's saying, hey, it's your fault that you're here and you're kind of miserable and you're getting nothing but bread and not enough butter. Which, by the way, is a really interesting thing because that's the simile that Bilbo had used to describe what it felt like to have been as old as he was and to have the ring as long as he was, as too little butter scraped across too much bread. And now here is Pippin sort of experiencing that. Now the real version where he's got a lot of bread and not a lot of butter to go with it. What's interesting though is that if we compare Pippin, who is only 28 years old, to Bilbo in The Hobbit, who was 50, Pippin's a lot less whiny, if you notice. He doesn't complain as much. He simply asks, "Why did you bring me here?" And Pippin quiets himself down when he's reminded of the actions that he took that brought him here. But, of course, I like to point out that, hello, Moogle, that we should not only forgive Pippin for what he did, but we should be very thankful that he did what he did, that he stole the Palantir and that he contacted Sauron. Of course, not meaning to contact Sauron. That was quite accidental, because it's probably the most important event in The Lord of the Rings. It's probably the most important event of the Third Age, except for, the fall of Sauron and Bilbo finding the ring. Those are the only two that would be above. Maybe Gollum finding the ring as well. But it's one of the most key moments in the entire history of Middle-earth, and especially of the Third Age, because this is what allows the war to be won. Because now, Sauron has it in his head that the ring bearer, who he only knows as a hobbit named Baggins, is, or at least was, around the vicinity of Isengard. And you have to remember that Isengard is a part of Gondor. And we know that Aragorn, we haven't been told it exactly yet, but we know that Aragorn used the Palantir to speak to Sauron. Well, not to speak to him. There was no words exchanged, but to commune with Sauron. So if you think of this from Sauron's perspective, he knows that there's a hobbit, and the name is Baggins, and that he is holding the Ring of Power. And one day, there's a hobbit in the Palantir, in the Orthanc stone, that Saruman has. So now he's thinking, well, Saruman's been looking for this guy. Saruman has been looking for the ring. He must have caught the ring bearer. So he sends one of the Nazgul to retrieve the hobbit and the ring. And when the Nazgul gets to Isengard, there's no ring, there's no hobbit. The place is wrecked. It's been picked clean. It's been It's been almost destroyed. The only part of it that still stands is the Tower of Orthanc. And suddenly Sauron is contacted again, this time by a tall Númenorian man who has Elendil's sword reforged. He has the Elisar, and he believes at this moment that Aragorn has the ring. So this is why he's so intent on attacking Minas Tirith, because he thinks that's where the ring is. Now, he was going to attack Minas Tirith regardless, no matter what. You know, Sauron calls Pippin a dainty via the Palantir. This dainty is not for him. I believe that he was actually referring to the ring, because if we remember the words of Sauron's messenger that went to Erebor, he referred to the ring as a trifle. And Sauron sort of likes to downplay how important the ring is to other people, because he believes that if they think it's just some ring that he likes, that he just wants because he likes it, that they're not going to try to take it and use it against him. And try to become the Lord of the Rings. He doesn't want to be challenged because he's got a lot on his plate. So that it's and you know what? I mean, you could be right. He could have been referring to Pippin as a dainty, but I believe he was talking about the ring. It's one of those things that's a little open for interpretation. I'm not telling you that you're wrong. I'm telling you what my interpretation is. So keep that in mind as well. My interpretation is that he was speaking about the ring, and I'm just giving you the reason why I believe that. Because of what we've seen with how he handled the Erebor situation. Because he had his guy tell Dane the Second Ironfoot that there is this hobbit named Baggins, and he didn't even say any kind of like crazy lie. He straight up told him he has a ring, and it's something that Sauron really wants. It's not important. It's just something Sauron fancies. So we're trying to get it back to make the Dark Lord happy. And if you help us, you can make the Dark Lord happy, and you could be his friend. But, what's really interesting is, so Sauron was going to attack Minas Tirith. He wants Gondor wiped off the map. He doesn't want to. This is one of the few situations where he doesn't want to have them join him. He doesn't want them to be enslaved. He wants them gone. He wants them fully gone. And there's a reason for that the Lord of the Rings doesn't even get into. That's probably Laurel texting me back. Let me just check on that. It is Laurel. Okay, so she'll probably be showing. So the Lord of the Rings doesn't even really get into why does he want Gondor gone. And, that's something that the Silmarillion gets into. It's because to him, this is, hey Dylan, this is just Numenor Part 2. This is Numenor Part 2. He thought he had wiped Numenor off the map. I mean, he literally did get Numenor wiped off the map. He didn't do the wiping himself, but he facilitated it. He hastened it. They were on that road anyway, but he hastened it. He made the situation worse. Sauron never saw a situation that he couldn't make worse. So really, he was quite flummoxed when he finds out that not only did part of Numenor survive the Akalabeth, but it's the part that he didn't even like. It's not the part that are wicked and that worshipped Melkor and worshipped him and helped him achieve his goals. It's the part that was against him. And they're in Middle-earth now, in a land right next to his own. That really aggravates him, So he wants them gone, but he's patient. Sauron is one of the Ainur. He's an angel. So from his perspective, he has all the time in the world to take care of this situation. But now, with the idea that one of Elendil's heirs has the ring and is consolidating his power, he feels he has to act rather quickly and rather rashly, and that's why he is going to war where they're in a situation where Gondor actually has a shot. If this had waited another few decades, it would have just been over. It would have been a steamroll. You know what I mean? There would have been nothing that Gondor could have done to win militarily. But with him acting now, they actually stand a chance, especially, well, they have Gandalf and they have all these great people and everything, he could have waited, but he's not waiting because he doesn't want anybody to have his ring. And he certainly doesn't want anybody who might try to use the ring to challenge him. Now, we know that Aragorn's not going to do that. It's not in his personality. It wasn't even in Isildur's personality. People tend to think of Isildur as being a bit nefarious, and the films have a lot to answer to because of that. But he didn't want to use the ring. He tried to use the ring. It didn't work out, and he realized that this is no good. And of course, it didn't work out for him anyway. We know that. And we're going to talk a lot about Isildur when we do Unfinished Tales, but let's continue here. Before long, he was walking with Gandalf once more down the cold corridor to the door of Tower Hall. There Denethor sat in a grey gloom, like an old patient spider. Pippin thought he did not seem to have moved since the day before. He beckoned Gandalf to a seat, but Pippin was left for a while, standing unheeded. Presently the old man turned to him. Well, Master Peregrine, I hope that you used yesterday to your profit and to your liking, though I fear the board is barer in this city than you could wish. Pippin had an uncomfortable feeling that most of what he had said or done was somehow known to the lord of the city, and much was guessed of what he thought as well. He did not answer. What would you do in my service? I thought, sir, that you would tell me my duties. I will, when I learn what you are fit for, said Denethor. But that I shall learn soonest, maybe, if I keep you beside me. The esquire of my chamber has begged leave to go to the out-garrison, so you shall take his place for a while. You shall wait on me, bear errands, and talk to me if war and counsel leave me any leisure. Can you sing? Yes, said Pippin. Yes, well enough for my own people. But we have no songs fit for great halls and evil times, lord. We seldom sing of anything more terrible than wind or rain, and most of my songs are about things that make us laugh, or about food and drink, of course. And why should such songs be unfit for my halls or for such hours as these? We who have lived long under the shadow may surely listen to echoes from a land untroubled by it. Then we may feel that our vigil was not fruitless, though it may have been thankless. Pippin's heart sank. He did not relish the idea of singing any song of the Shire to the Lord of Minas Tirith. Certainly not the comic ones that he knew best. They were too, rustic for such an occasion. He was, however, spared the ordeal for the present. He was not commanded to sing. Denethor turned to Gandalf, asking questions about the Rohirrim and their policies and the position of Eomer, the king's nephew. Pippin marveled at the amount that the lord seemed to know about a people that lived far away, though it must, he thought, be many years since Denethor himself had ridden abroad. Presently Denethor waved to Pippin and dismissed him again for a while. Go to the armories of the citadel, he said, and get you there the livery and gear of the tower. It will be ready. It was commanded yesterday. Return when you are clad. It was as he did, and Pippin soon found himself arrayed in strange garments, all of black and silver. He had a small hauberk, its rings forged of steel, maybe, yet black as jet, and a high-crowned helm, with small raven wings on either side, yet with a silver star in the center of the circlet. Above the mail was a short surcoat of black, but broidered on the breast of silver with a token of the tree. His old clothes were folded and put away, but he was permitted to keep the grey cloak of Lorien, though not to wear it while on duty. He looked now, had he known it, verily Ernle Ferianath, the prince of the halflings, that folk had called him. But he felt uncomfortable, and the gloom began to weigh on his spirits. It was dark and dim all day. From the sunless dawn until evening the heavy shadow had deepened, and all hearts in the city were oppressed. Far above a great cloud streamed slowly westward from the black land, devouring light borne upon a wind of war. But below the air was still and breathless, as if all the Vale of Anduin waited for the onset of a ruinous storm. All right, let's talk a little bit about Denethor specifically, and most notably the way that Pippin is perceiving him, and he's sort of in wonder of him, because as soon as he comes in, Denethor, well, not as soon as he comes in, because Denethor ignores him for a little bit and just speaks to Gandalf. But when he does speak to him, one of the first things that Denethor says is a very pointed comment about the board. I will read exactly what he said. I'm going to go back to that here. Where he said, I fear the board is barer in the city than you can wish. And what he's talking about is food. He's saying, well, I think you're getting less food than what you're accustomed to. And Pippin is sort of like having this thought, how does he know that? You know, how does he know that I was sort of complaining about the food earlier, that all I got was a piece of bread and a very meager amount of butter and some milk, you know? How did he know that? And now he's wondering, how does he know all about Rohan? How does he know all these things about faraway lands and private conversations and things that he probably should not know? Now, of course, we know the answer is the Palantir. But it's really interesting to come back to this knowing that, and you see all the little hints about it. And, we had talked about this in the first chapter of The Return of the King, of Gandalf's warning to Pippin, and how Denethor has a way of sort of reading people's minds, not in the most literal sense of being able to pry into their very thoughts, but that he is very good at figuring out what a person is all about, and what their emotions are and what their current disposition is. He's a very smart, very shrewd man, but also he's spying on people. He has the Palantir and he's looking around, because that conversation, that brief little bit between Gandalf and Pippin, Denethor knew about that. He knew about that. And it fueled his intense dislike of and distrust of Gandalf, because one of the things, if we remember, that Gandalf said to Pippin was, don't mention Boromir. Don't mention Boromir. And of course, Boromir gets mentioned anyway, so I have to stop and drink some water. But if we think of the idea of Denethor having this thought in his head that the function of Gandalf is to take over Gondor. We know that's not true, but that's what Denethor believes is true. This is sort of playing into that. Well, here he's manipulating, he's saying don't mention Boromir, he's telling him he's coaching him, you know? And so everything that he sees is feeding into this paranoia that he has. Let's continue. About the 11th hour, released at last for a while from service, Pippin came out and went in search of food and drink, and to cheer his heavy heart and make his task of wading more supportable. In the messes he met Beregond again, who had just come from an errand over the Pelennor out to the guard towers upon the causeway. Together they strolled out to the walls, for Pippin felt imprisoned indoors and stifled even in the lofty citadel. Now they sat side by side again in the embrasure, looking eastwards, where they had eaten and talked the day before. It was the sunset hour, but the great pall had now stretched far into the west, and only as it sank at last into the sea did the sun escape to send over a brief farewell gleam before the night, even as Frodo saw it at the crossroads, touching the head of the fallen king. But to the fields of Pelennor, under the shadow of Mindolluin, there came no gleam. They were brown and drear. So let me just answer the question that Joe has. The Palantir really allows Denethor to listen in on any conversation within its range. You never thought about that. So, and this is something that we're going to go into a lot of depth when we do Unfinished Tales. But the Palantir actually have more than one function. And the function that we think of is two-way communication between them. But when you read the chapter in Unfinished Tales, the Palantir, you learn that there are also things that you could use to survey. You could look outwards using them. And actually, that's probably their primary function. Because what does Palantir mean? in Elvish, it means to see far, far-sighted. So he's able to see things that are far away, and in fact, even hear things that are far away. All he needs to know is where to look. And as long as he knows where to point the thing, he could see anything, within, reason, within the range, as you would say, And pretty much anything that goes on in Gondor is the range. And hey there, Deb. And what's crazy is that includes Rohan, because we have to remember that Rohan was once part of Gondor. So basically anything that happens within the boundaries of both Gondor and Rohan, Denethor could be listening, he could be watching, with that Palantir. It's just if he happens to be looking in that direction. And he's really good at using it. He's really good at using it. The mistake he made is that he looked towards Mordor, and that was really what his undoing was. He looked towards Mordor, and that drove him insane. And that's what we saw. Also, the same thing that happened to Saruman, because Saruman was using it that way. He didn't pick up the Palantir thinking, I'm going to go talk to Saruman on this thing. He picked up the Palantir thinking, let me see what I could see. Let's see what's out there. And eventually, he wound up looking at Sauron, and that's what led to his undoing. Although he was sort of already on the way, as we know. He already was up to no good. All right, let's continue along. Already it seemed years to Pippin since he had sat there before, in some half-forgotten time, when he had still been a hobbit, a light-hearted wanderer touched little by the perils he had passed through. Now he was one small soldier in a city preparing for a great assault, clad in the proud but somber manner of the Tower of Guard. In some other time and place, Pippin might have been pleased with his new array, but he knew now that he was taking part in no play. He was in deadly earnest the servant of a grim master in the greatest peril. The hauberk was burdensome, and the helm weighed upon his head. His cloak he had cast aside upon the seat. He turned his tired gaze away from the darkling fields below and yawned, and then he sighed. You are weary of this day, said Beregond. Yes, said Pippin, very, tired out with idleness and waiting. I have kicked my heels at the door of my master's chamber for many slow hours, while he has debated with Gandalf and the prince and other great persons. And I am not used, Master Beregond, to waiting hungry on others while they eat. It is a sore trial for a hobbit, that. No doubt you will think I should feel the honour more deeply. But what is the good of such honour? Indeed, what is the good even of food and drink under this creeping shadow? What does it mean? The very air seems thick and brown. Do you often have such glooms when the wind is in the east? Nay, said Beregond, this is no weather of the world. This is some device of his malice, some broil of fume from the mountain of fire that he sends to darken hearts in council. And so it doth indeed. I wish the Lord Faramir would return. He would not be dismayed. But now who knows if he will ever come back from across the river out of the darkness? Yes, said Pippin. Gandalf, too, is anxious. He was disappointed, I think, not to find Faramir here. And where has he got to himself? He left the Lord's Council before the noon meal, and in no good mood either, I thought. Perhaps he has had some foreboding of bad news. Now, something big is about to happen, but let's talk about... I just want to tell a little bit of a story here. So if you guys remember, I forget exactly what year this happened. As a matter of fact, it would not be difficult for me to find that out if I just search through my my Discord history for a specific phrase. Am I spelling it right? So this happened in 2023. So 3 years ago. Let's see if anybody remember. Well, I'm sure you guys remember. It was only 3 years ago, but do you remember where we had these terrible, terrible fires in California and also in parts of Canada? And due to the winds that were coming out of the west and all these fires that were going unchecked for days on end, that this pallor of smoke and smog had overtaken the vast majority of the North American continent. And to me, that felt like what Pippin is talking about this pallor out of Mordor, where we were having to constantly check what the air quality was, whether it was okay to go outside. I remember looking out the window and, during the noontime, and it looked like it was sunset, you know? And you couldn't go outside. It was like ashes in your throat, and it was choking. And this went on for like about a week. A lot of people got sick off of it, and I couldn't help but think of the way that Sauron had blotted out the sun and sent this pallor out over Gondor and Rohan. And in fact, some of the, and I have friends that are on the West Coast, and they were sending me pictures that looked like what you would expect Mordor to look like. Of course, that's in the West, whereas Gondor is in the East. But, it was kind of crazy because where I am specifically in Pennsylvania, we were getting some of the absolute worst air quality other than, the epicenters in Canada and California. We were getting the absolute worst of it, whereas like all the surrounding areas, it was bad, but not too terrible, It's yes, that is potent. And then you think about, this is what Sauron is doing. It's going over the mountains of shadow, and it's reaching, even as far as Minas Tirith, and well, Minas Tirith is not far away, but even as far as, say, Meduseld, so it's blanketing a large portion. Now that's not as large as the United States is. That would be about, like, say, Mount Doom is sort of like right where Sarajevo would be, and then you think of it going over Italy and a little bit beyond Italy, So it's still a large area, right? It's still a large area, but yeah, mountains didn't stop it, and the winds were so strong. These winds going into the east, it was a pretty rough time for pretty much anybody that lived in the United States or in Canada, in parts of Mexico as well. It was pretty rough, and it just so happened that where I am was some of the very worst. Thankfully, that passed. But yeah, it did make me think of. I mean, let's be real. Me being me, there's precious few things that happen that don't make me think of either The Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit or The Silmarillion in some sort of way, right? Like, it's just, I'm going to relate everything to that just because it's an obsession. But in this case, yeah, that is what it really reminded me of. Now, here is this next section. Instead of stopping after it, I'm going to stop before it. I'm going to sort of set this up. And what's going to happen here, so we have Pippin and Baragon sitting there sort of just jawing about everything that's happening or is about to happen or has happened. And then one of the Nazgul is going to fly overhead, and there is going to be this moment, that's going to call back to previously. Now, if we remember, in the first chapter, there was this moment where one of the Nazgul had flown overhead while Pippin was out with Baragon, and they had this sort of like, Baragon had this moment of almost like an existential crisis where he felt this insane level of despair, and then it passed, and now it seems like it's going to repeat, but this is actually where, where Faramir is going to return and chased by the Nazgul, and Gandalf's going to go out and save him. So, but previously it seems like it's a repeat of something that happens. It's like almost, it's that time for the Nazgul to come by and do a sort of fly by and, and scare the wits out of us. Must have been like a basin where it would have roll and settle. Absolutely. I mean, I'm in the Pocono Mountains, so that's absolutely what was happening. It was a little worse just to the north of me, but yeah, that whole area of like sort of like the New York metropolitan area and like the Poconos and parts of New Jersey got it like exceptionally bad. And I think it's because you have like all these different winds coming in and rolling in a basin, like you said. But anyway, yeah, it seems like it's going to be, again, with this, where, there's this almost sort of like Shakespearean monologue that Baragon gives of this despair. But this is different. It turns out to be something different. And thank you for the subscription. Let's move on here. Suddenly, as they talked, they were stricken dumb, frozen, as it were, to listening stones. Pippin cowered down with his hands pressed to his ears, but Beregond, who had been looking out from the battlement as he spoke of Faramir, remained there, stiffened, staring out with starting eyes. Pippin knew the shuddering cry that he had heard. It was the same that he had heard long ago in the marish of the Shire, but now it was grown in power and hatred, piercing the heart with a poisonous despair. At last Beregond spoke with an effort. "They have come," he said. "Take courage and look. There are fell things below." Reluctantly, Pippin climbed onto the seat and looked out over the wall. The Pelennor lay dim beneath them, fading away to the scarce guessed line of the great river. But now, wheeling swiftly across it like shadows of untimely night, he saw in the middle airs below him 5 bird-like forms, horrible as carrion fowl, yet greater than eagles, cruel as death. Now they swooped near, venturing almost within bowshot of the walls. Now they circled away. "Black riders," muttered Pippin. "Black riders of the air. But see, Beregond," he cried, "they are looking for something surely. See how they wheel and whoop. See how they wheel and swoop, always down to that point over there. And can you see something moving on the ground? Dark little things. Yes, men on horses, 4 or 5. Ah, I cannot stand it. Gandalf, Gandalf, save us!" Another long screech rose and fell, and he threw himself back again from the wall, panting like a hunted animal. Faint and seemingly remote, through the shuddering cry he heard, winding up from below, the sound of a trumpet ending on a long, high note. "Faramir! The Lord Faramir! It is his call!" cried Beregond. "Brave heart! But how can he win to the gate if these foul hell-hawks have other weapons than fear? But look! They hold on. They will make the gate. No! The horses are running mad. Look! The men are thrown. They are running on foot. No, one is still up, but he rides back to the others. That will be the captain. He can master both beasts and men. Ah, there one of the foul things is stooping on him. Help! Help! Will no one go out to help him, Faramir?" With that Beregond sprang away and ran off into the gloom. Ashamed of his terror, while Beregond of the guard thought first of the captain whom he loved, Pippin got up and peered out. At that moment he caught a flash of white and silver coming from the north, like a small star down on the dusky fields. It moved with the speed of an arrow and grew as it came, converging swiftly with the flight of the 4 men towards the gate. It seemed to Pippin that a pale light was spread about it, and the heavy shadows gave way before it, and then, as it drew near, he thought he had heard, like an echo in the walls, a great voice calling. "Gandalf!" he cried. "Gandalf! He always turns up when things are darkest. Go on, White Rider! Gandalf, Gandalf!" he shouted wildly, like an onlooker at a great race, urging on a runner who was far beyond encouragement. But now the dark, swooping shadows were aware of the newcomer. One wheeled toward him, but it seemed to Pippin that he raised his hand, and from it a shaft of white light stabbed upwards. The Nazgul gave a long, wailing cry and swerved away. And with that the 4 others wavered, and then rising in swift spirals they passed away eastward, vanishing into the lowering cloud above, and down on the Pelennor it seemed for a while less dark. Pippin watched, and he saw the horsemen and the White Rider meet and halt, waiting for those on foot. Men now hurried out to them from the city, and soon they all passed from sight under the outer walls, and he knew that they were entering the gate. Guessing that they would come at once to the tower and the steward, he hurried to the entrance of the citadel. There he was joined by many others who had watched the race and the rescue from the high walls. And hello there, Vampire. How is it going? Welcome to the stream. You're a sort of a recent member, aren't you? I had seen that you had joined sort of recently, so thank you for that. I just wanted to say that. I believe you joined sort of recently, but thank you for coming by to the stream. You should have access to my emotes as well. Let's see, here we are. It was not long before a clamour was heard in the streets leading up from the outer circles, and there was much cheering and crying of the names of Faramir and Mithrandir. Presently Pippin saw torches, and followed by a press of people 2 horsemen riding slowly. One was in white, but shining no longer, pale in the twilight as if his fire was spent or veiled. The other was dark, and his head was bowed. They dismounted, and as grooms took Shadowfax and the other horse, they walked forward to the sentinel at the gate. Gandalf steadily, his grey cloak flung back, and a fire still smouldering in his eyes, the other clad all in green, slowly swaying a little as a weary or wounded man. Hey there, Katie Gaming. This is your Bible study. I have a friend of mine. Her name is June, and sometimes she comes by to the Tolkien stream. She'll be on the Twitch side, not the YouTube side, and she'll say, "How's Bible class going?" Or if Matt and Sid are with me, she'll say, "How's Bible study going?" So I fully relate to that, Katie. I fully do, and thank you for coming by. Let's continue. I do want to talk about this, but let's continue until we reach a good stopping point here, and then I'll talk about all of this that's going on. Pippin pressed forward as they passed under the lamp beneath the gate arch, and then he saw the pale face of Faramir. He caught his breath. It was the face of one who had been assailed by a great fear or anguish, but has mastered it and is now quiet. Proud and grave he stood for a moment as he spoke to the guard, and Pippin, gazing at him, saw how closely he resembled his brother Boromir, whom Pippin had liked from the first, admiring the great man's lordly but kindly manner. Yet suddenly, for Faramir, his heart was strangely moved with a feeling he had not known before. Here was one with an air of high nobility, such as Aragorn at times revealed, less high, perhaps, but yet also less incalculable and remote, one of the kings of men born into a later time, but touched with the wisdom and sadness of the elder race. He knew now why Beregond spoke his name with love. He was a captain that men would follow, that he would follow, even under the shadow of the Black Wings. "Faramir!" he cried aloud with the others. "Faramir!" And Faramir, catching his strange voice among the clamor of the men of the city, turned and looked down at him and was amazed. "Whence came you?" he said. "A halfling, and in the livery of the tower. Whence?" But with that Gandalf stepped to his side and spoke. "He came with me from the land of the halflings," he said. "He came with me. But let us not tarry here. There is much to say and do, and you are weary. He shall come with us. Indeed he must, for if he does not forget his new duties more easily than I do, he must attend on his lord again within this hour. Come, Pippin, follow us." Okay, let's talk about this. So, this is an interesting point because some people will ask questions about the personalities of the four primary hobbits, and we get a little bit of obviously we know how Frodo and Sam are. People tend to lump Merry and Pippin together, and they're really very different people. But what's really interesting here is how different Pippin is from Frodo, because when Faramir met Frodo, and he knew, he came to realize that Frodo knew his brother Boromir, he asked him a sort of a trap question. He asked him, "Well, what did you think of Boromir?" And Frodo sort of gave him this very even answer where he was sort of guarded, and Faramir knew just from the way that Frodo sort of shifted and the way that he answered and the sort of neutral language that he used that Frodo didn't really like Boromir. Frodo didn't like Boromir at all, and having heard now that Boromir had died and being in front of his brother, he's going to be diplomatic. He's not going to say, "Oh, your brother, he was such a jerk, man. I couldn't stand him. That guy, so arrogant, so ignorant, always aggravating Gandalf, always aggravating Aragorn. He's not going to say all that. There's no way that he would be that rude. But here we see that Pippin actually really liked Boromir. And I think that, the language here is that he liked him from the beginning. It wasn't just because Boromir saved his life and in fact died saving him or trying to protect him, but he liked him from the beginning, So it's really sort of interesting that, we learn this sort of thing where Pippin had this affinity for Boromir, and then Frodo, of course, did not like Boromir. I always find it interesting to see, how the personalities intersect and what the characters actually think about each other. Because we get a lot of how certain characters get along or don't get along, but there's a lot of it that you have to sort of just look for. You know, one of the things, it's not relevant to this passage, but one of the things that you really, really have to look for is Gimli is actually very, very fond of Frodo. And he never just comes out and says it. You know, he never just comes out and talks about how much he likes Frodo. But it's something that's very subtext. It's very between the lines. And you see in Lothlorien specifically that Frodo really likes Gimli, that they are close to each other. Um, and one of the moments that it's the most obvious is when Haldir is saying, well, we don't let dwarves into Lothlorien. It's before they even get into the idea of blindfolding. He's just saying dwarves are not allowed. And who is it that speaks up for him? You know, it's not Aragorn. It's Frodo, actually. Frodo is the first to jump up and say, and what's interesting, Haldir wasn't speaking to Frodo. You know, he was speaking to Aragorn, and Frodo inserted himself and says, "But he's really great, and Elrond likes him, and he's been an amazing person this whole time. So how dare you say that? You know, once someone carries you on their shoulders through the deep snow, they're your buddy for life." The Red Horn Path. Yeah, well, that's very true. But what we're learning here is that Pippin liked Boromir from the moment he met him in Rivendell. So even before that, there was an affinity between them, that they were already sort of like cozy with each other. So yeah, it makes sense though that like he would be the one that, you know, Boromir would carry, and I think Merry was probably scooped up by Aragorn in that scene. But yeah, it's you know, you see the indications of it along the way once you really stop to think about it, you know. And this is one of those moments where you say to yourself, the next time I read the book, I'm going to look for that. I'm going to look for these moments. And you just found a moment, Joe, at the Red Horn Pass where Boromir and Pippin are drawn to each other. And now I've brought it to your attention, and you're going to look for these moments between Frodo and Gimli. You know what I mean? And there's these moments with Pippin and Gandalf. There was moments, of course, Merry and Theoden are very close. It's really cool to see those sort of moments. There is a sort of a meme in the Lord of the Rings community, or the Tolkien community in general, that Frodo doesn't like Legolas. That's not true, but it's a meme. It's mostly born out of the films. It's mostly born out of the films because they barely say two words to each other in the films. As a matter of fact, the only time that Legolas speaks to Frodo in the films is, you know, you have my bow. And they don't really talk to each other. Now, they do talk to each other more in the books, but it's still not a lot. And there's a scene at the end of, well, towards the end of the Return of the King, when Frodo is, you know, he's been sleeping and he wakes up, and then Sam is there, and Merry and Pippin's there, and Gandalf's there, and Gimli's there, and he's sort of saying everybody's name with joy as they come in, and then Legolas comes in, and he's just sort of like, "And you know," he doesn't say his name. He just kind of gets quiet. So there's this sort of idea that Frodo doesn't like Legolas. I don't see it in the book at all. And I always thought that I would definitely want to ask Peter Jackson, why doesn't he say Legolas's name? Some people also like to interpret it as that Legolas is such a minor character that Frodo doesn't actually know his name. Of course, that's not true either. It could be true in the context of the Peter Jackson films, and Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings. It's not true in Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. He absolutely knows everybody's name. And to think of a hobbit traveling with somebody and not knowing anybody's name would be horrifying, because hobbits are their culture is so steeped in politeness and manners, and you know, and we see that a lot. And we think back to the Hobbit. You know, Bilbo is traveling with 13 dwarves, some of which have very similar names. You know, he never mixes up Fili and Kili. He never mixes up Duri and Ori, or Oin and Gloin, or Balin and Dwalin. He knows who each of them are, and he even has his own opinions of each of them. Like, we could see that he especially liked Dwalin and Bombur, you know. So, you know, there's that as well. It's interesting. So the thought of, Frodo not knowing Legolas's name is it's laughable. It could be true in just in the film version. It's certainly not true in the book. But let's continue here. I had a lot to say about that. So at length they came to the private chamber of the lord of the city. There deep seats were set about, a brazier of charcoal and wine was brought, and there Pippin, hardly noticed, stood behind the chair of Denethor, and felt his weariness little, so eagerly did he listen to all that was said. Let me also continue here, and before I continue, I meant to say this before. There is also, as you noticed, already a very strong, powerful affinity that Pippin has for Faramir, and that Faramir has for Pippin. And this is the first time they've met. And they're already sort of like, yeah. And it's no surprise to find out that Pippin later, he gets married. And he has a son, and he names his son Faramir. It's really interesting to note, that he only has one son. And he names his son Faramir Took. When Faramir had taken white bread and drunk a draught of wine, he sat upon a low chair at his father's left hand. Removed a little, upon the other side sat Gandalf in a chair of carven wood, and he seemed at first to be asleep, for at the beginning Faramir spoke only of the errand on which he had been sent out 10 days before. And he brought tidings of Ithilien and of movements of the enemy and his allies, and he told of the fight on the road, when the men of Harad and their great beast were overthrown, a captain reporting to his master such matters as had often been heard before, small things of border war that now seemed useless and petty, shorn of their renown. Then suddenly Faramir looked at Pippin. But now we come to strange matters, he said, for this is not the first halfling that I have seen walking out of the northern legends into the southlands. At that Gandalf sat up and gripped the arms of his chair, but he said nothing, and with a look stopped the exclamation on Pippin's lips. Denethor looked at their faces and nodded his head, as though in sign that he had read much there before it was spoken. Slowly, while the others sat silent and still, Faramir told his tale, with his eyes for the most part on Gandalf, though now and again his glance strayed to Pippin, as if to refresh his memory of others that he had seen. As his story was unfolding of his meeting with Frodo and his servant, and of the events at Henneth Anun, Pippin became aware that Gandalf's hands were trembling as they clutched the carven wood. White they seemed now, and very old, and as he looked at them suddenly with a thrill of fear, Pippin knew that Gandalf himself, was troubled, even afraid. The air of the room was close and still. At last, when Faramir spoke of his parting with the travellers, and of their resolve to go to Cirith Ungol, his voice fell and he shook his head and sighed. Then Gandalf sprang up. Cirith Ungol? Morgul Vale, he said. The time, Faramir, the time. When did you part with them? When will they reach that accursed valley? I parted with them in the morning 2 days ago, said Faramir. It is 15 leagues thence to the vale of the Morgulduin, if they went straight south, and then they would still be 5 leagues westward of the accursed tower. At swiftest they could not come there before today, but maybe they have not come there yet. Indeed, I see what you fear, but the darkness is not due to their venture. It began yestereve, and all Ithilien was under shadow last night. It is clear to me that the enemy has long planned an assault on us, and its hour has already been determined before ever travellers left my keeping. Gandalf paced the floor. The morning of 2 days ago, nigh on 3 days of journey. How far is this place where you have parted? Some 25 leagues as a bird flies, answered Faramir. But I could not come more swiftly. Yestereve I lay at Caer Andros, the long isle in the river northward, where we hold in defence, and horses are kept on the hither bank. As the dark grew on... Let's try that again. As the dark drew on, I knew that haste was needed. So I rode thence with 3 others that could also be horsed. The rest of my company I sent south to strengthen the garrison at the fords of Osgiliath. I hope that I have not done ill. He looked at his father. Ill? Cried Denethor, and his eyes flashed suddenly. Why do you ask? The men were under your command, or do you ask for my judgment on all your deeds? Your bearing is lowly in my presence, yet it is long now since you turned from your own way at my counsel. See, you have spoken skilfully as ever, but I Have I not seen your eye fixed on me, Thrandir, seeking whether you said well or too much? He has long had your heart in his keeping. My son, your father is old, but not yet dotted. I can see and hear as well as was my wont, and little of what you have said, let's try that again, and little of what you have half said or left unsaid is now hidden from me. I know the answer to many riddles. Alas, alas for Boromir. If what I have done displeases you, my father, said Faramir quietly, I wish that I had known your counsel before the burden of so weighty a judgment was thrust on me. Would that have availed to change your judgment, said Denethor. You would still have done just so, I deem. I know you well. Ever your desire is to appear lordly and generous as a king of old, gracious, gentle. That may well befit one of high race if he sits in power and peace, but in desperate hours gentleness may be repaid with death. So be it, said Faramir. So be it, cried Denethor. But not with your death only, Lord Faramir, with the death also of your father and of all your people, whom it is your part to protect now that Boromir is gone. Do you wish, then, said Faramir, that our places had been exchanged? Yes, I wish that indeed, said Denethor, for Boromir was loyal to me and no wizard's pupil. He would have remembered that his father's need, and would not have squandered what fortune gave. He would have brought me a mighty gift. For a moment Faramir's restraint gave way. I would ask you, my father, to remember why it was that I, not he, was in Ithilien. On one occasion at least your counsel has prevailed not long ago. It was the lord of the city that gave him that errand to him. Stir not the bitterness in the cup that I have mixed for myself, said Denethor. Have I not tasted it now many nights upon my tongue, foreboding that worse yet lay in the dregs? And now indeed I find. Would it were not so. Would that this thing had come to me. Comfort yourself, said Gandalf. In no case would Boromir have brought it to you. He is dead and died well. May he sleep in peace. Yet you deceive yourself. He would have stretched out his hand to that thing, and taking it he would have fallen. He would have kept it for his own. And when he returned, you would not have known your son. The face of Denethor set hard and cold. You found Boromir less apt to your hand, did you not? He said softly. But I, who was his father, say that he would have brought it to me. You are wise, maybe, Mithrandir, yet with all your subtleties you have not all wisdom. Counsels may be found that are neither the webs of wizards nor the haste of fools. I have in this matter more lore and wisdom than you deem. And what is your wisdom? Said Gandalf. Enough to perceive that there are two follies to avoid. To use this thing is perilous. At this hour, to send it in the hands of a witless halfling into the land of the enemy himself, as you have done, and this son of mine, that is madness. And the Lord Denethor, what would he have done? Neither. But most surely not for any argument would he have set this thing at a hazard beyond all but a fool's hope, risking our utter ruin if the enemy should recover what he lost. Nay, it should have been kept hidden dark and deep, not used, I say, unless at the uttermost end of need, but set beyond his grasp, save by a victory so final that when befell would not trouble us being dead. You think, as is your wont, my lord, of Gondor only, said Gandalf. Yet there are other men and other lives, and still time to be. And for me, I pity even his slaves. Let's talk about that, actually. I was going to continue, but let's talk about all of this. So, we're having this argument where Denethor has learned that Faramir had the opportunity to take the One Ring and to bring it to him, and he's disappointed. Now, Peter Jackson obviously read this part, and I think he misunderstood it in a very important way. When Faramir said, you wish our places had been swapped, he's not saying, do you wish that Boromir was alive and I was dead? But I think that's the way that Peter Jackson took it. I think Peter Jackson misinterpreted the scene and thought that Denethor was agreeing to the idea that he would rather have Boromir alive and Faramir dead. And he got the idea from that and from the way that he was speaking to Faramir that he doesn't like Faramir. that he really, really doesn't like him at all, and that he's less than nothing to him, and he really just, he's the unfavorite, as they say. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, Joe. And he says wizards people. And here's the thing, he really distrusts Gandalf. And the reason is because about 40 years before this, nearly 50 years, about 48 years before this scene had happened, there was a young man of about 20 or so years old who came to Gondor. He also came to Rohan, but Gondor is what matters here. And he became a member of the army of the steward Ecthelion, and he was called Thorongil. And Thorongil was this guy that everybody liked. They thought he was an excellent leader, a great commander of men. And then one day he just disappeared. He went back to where he came from. Now, the tale of Thorongil is told in Unfinished Tales. Actually, I think it's in the appendix. It's either in the appendix or Unfinished Tales. We're going to get to it either way. And the whole thing is that we learn that Thorongil was Aragorn, even without Tolkien straight up telling us. He never actually says Thorongil is Aragorn, unless you look at the index, then you see that he is. You're meant to just kind of understand that. And what's interesting is that Denethor, his father, Ecthelion, the former steward, really, really liked Thorongil. And Denethor was sort of feeling like, why are you so fond of this guy? And you're not of me and all the things that I'm doing for you. So he was the Faramir. You know what I mean? He was the Faramir in that situation. And there was this sort of older brother figure that was getting all the attention and all the accolades and all the love from his father. And Tolkien mentions in the narration that Denethor perceived that Thorongil was an agent of Mithrandir come to usurp the throne, and he still believes that. He knows all about Aragorn now. He knows what's up, and he thinks that Gandalf is trying to take over Gondor by putting his puppet, the wizard's pupil, on the throne. And now, with Boromir dead, he's feeling really not only the despair of having lost his son, but he's feeling the despair of that when he's gone, Gandalf is going to be in charge in his mind, because he's thinking of Faramir as being a puppet of Gandalf. And as you pointed out, Joe, Boromir, to a certain extent, not exactly the same, but to a certain extent, had the same sort of thinking, where anything he didn't agree with is, well, that's just what those wizards and elves tell you, and they don't know everything, he goes on this rant about, all these wise people, maybe they're not so great, maybe they don't know what they're talking about. Maybe I'm the one that knows what I'm talking about. I'm the one that's been, on the front lines fighting Sauron and everything. So, yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. So, like, Gandalf's going to talk about it a little bit more in a bit. But what's really interesting about the Faramir and Denethor dynamic is that they're almost the same guy. Faramir looks like his father. Faramir has the same propensities for intellectual pursuit that his father had. Boromir was more of a meathead sort of guy. He was, a warrior. Whereas Faramir is more the warrior, poet, and scholar that Denethor was. So then you start to wonder, like, well, why does he love Boromir more than Faramir? And he does love Faramir. He does. And Gandalf knows that. I think Peter Jackson didn't know that. Even though he had Gandalf say that same line, your father loves you, before the end, he will realize it. He had Gandalf say that line, but he really made Denethor a lot meaner in the movie. And he outright change the dialogue to match his interpretation that he was really wishing that Faramir was dead, which is a terrible thing for a son to hear from his father. The reality is that he was wishing that Boromir was an Ithilien, and Faramir was the one that went with the Fellowship, and maybe he wouldn't have died because he wouldn't have taken the ring, right? Faramir is a guy who wouldn't touch the ring, so obviously he wouldn't take the ring. He wouldn't have gotten killed in that same way because he wouldn't have been arguing with Frodo. It would have been all different, right? So he's not saying, I wish my other son died instead of the one that I actually like. He's saying, I wish the one that is really beholden to me and doesn't think much, but just does what I want him to do, was in Ithilien. And then Faramir's response is, hey, you're the one that put me there. You're the one that orchestrated the way that this all worked out. And he says this line, and I love this line because it's very Shakespearean. I'm going to read it again. Stir not the bitterness in the cup that I mixed for myself. Have I not tasted it now many nights upon my tongue, foreboding that worse yet lay in the dregs? So with that, he is acknowledging, I know that this is my fault. I know I screwed up. You don't have to remind me. You don't need to blame me for this because I already blame myself. He is just wishing that he had Boromir there to do his bidding. Because Boromir, like, he wasn't like his father in a lot of ways, but he was so loyal to his father. So loyal to his father. And Gandalf, the smartest guy in the room, we can't ignore that, right? He says another line that is just absolutely amazing that I have to highlight. When he returned, you would not have known your son. If he's saying Boromir wouldn't have brought you the ring, he would have taken it for himself. And when he came home, you would have looked at him and you would have seen a completely different person. Not just because of the things that the ring does to a person, but because for the first time, he would be against you. You would find yourself on the other side of the board from him. You would be in his way. Because when he spoke to Frodo, he started talking about himself as the king. He wasn't saying my father should be the king, although he did say that at one point. But he wasn't saying my father should be the king. He was saying I should be the king. You think he wouldn't step over his father to take that with the one ring? So what Gandalf says when he says, comfort yourself that this didn't happen and that your son died loving you and that you never had to look at him and see him as an enemy. Now, he doesn't look at Faramir as an enemy. He looks at Faramir as someone who disappointed him. He thinks Faramir should have brought the ring to the city. And he does this thing where he sort of leaves himself an opening. He starts going, I wouldn't want to use it. Well, unless it was the bitterest emergency. And it's sort of like one of those things where somebody who, say, is trying to kick a habit, like we'll use cigarettes as an example. Let's say they've been smoking for a long time. They decide they're going to give up smoking. Their doctor's on their case, right? Now, if they were smart, what's the first thing that they would do? They would get rid of all the cigarettes, right? Throw them away, or even better, have a person, a friend, a family member come into their house, take all the cigarettes, throw them away, get them. Don't even leave them in the trash. To take them far away and get rid of them. That's the smart thing. But do people do that? No, they don't do that. What they do is they say, this is the last pack I have, and once I'm finished with this, I'm done. And then what do? They take like 2 weeks to finish it while bumming cigarettes off of other people, right? And then at one point, they're going to have one left, And they're going to say, well, maybe I'll just keep that just in case, if I really, really need it. If you have something like that, you're going to use it eventually, right? You can't keep it around you if you have an addict sort of mentality. And what's more addictive than power? What's more addictive than the One Ring? The One Ring is power. What's more addictive than that sort of thing? Especially the power of seduction and the power of controlling people. Faramir doesn't say, well, I'd like to keep it safe and I would never use it unless I really needed to. What does he say to Frodo and Sam? He says, I wouldn't touch it if I saw it on the side of the road. It's a very different mentality. And it's so interesting when we hear that Faramir is a lot like his father. He's not a lot like his father now. He's a lot like what his father used to be. Because we have to remember that Denethor is a very broken character here. He's in his 60s, but he looks like he's in his 80s. He's a lot older looking than he is. What happened to him? His wife died. He had a wife. She was this young lady from Belfalos, and she came and she lived with him in Minas Tirith, and he loved her. She gave him 2 sons, and then she got sick and she died. And it was right around after his wife died that he started heavily using the Palantir. And when you go into a situation of using an artifact like that, you cannot be emotionally volatile. That leaves you open, and he started aging faster. It was right around then that people saw that that he was aging faster. And hey there, Wayne, you wander. How's it going, Wayne? So yeah, like I said, there's just so much going on this one page 795, if you're following along. So much going on. Some of the most amazing writing in terms of like the Shakespearean style dialogue. I'm going to read that part again. I know Joe likes it. I'm going to read that line again. It's just so good. Stir not the bitterness in the cup that I mixed for myself. Have I not tasted it now many nights upon my tongue, foreboding that worse yet lay in the dregs? And I didn't even talk about this. He's saying, I know I made things worse. Don't remind me. He's also saying, and I fear that it's going to get even worse. The decisions that I made have led us to where we are, and I've lost all hope. I don't really have much hope. Right now, he has the slimmest, tiniest, insiest little tiny bit of hope. And that is that Rohan is going to bail him out of this situation. Unfortunately, the messengers that went to Rohan did not make it back alive, if we remember. So he has no idea that they're coming. He has no idea that they're going to be arriving to save him. When his messengers don't come back, we know what happened to them. They're dead. But they did deliver their message. It was on the way back that they died. They got killed by orcs. All right, let's continue. And where will other men look for help if Gondor falls? Asks Denethor. If I had this thing now in the deep vaults of the citadel, we should not then shake with dread under the gloom, fearing the worst, and our counsels would be undisturbed. If you do not trust me to endure this test, you do not know me yet. None the less I do not trust you, said Gandalf. Had I done so, I would have sent this thing hither to your keeping, and spared myself and others much anguish. And now, hearing you speak, I trust you less. No more than Boromir. Nay, stay your wrath. I do not trust myself in this, and I refuse this thing even as freely given gift. You are strong, and still in some matters govern yourself, Denethor. Yet if you had received this thing, it would have overthrown you. Were it buried beneath the roots of Mindolluin, still it would burn your mind away as the darkness grows, and the yet worse things follow that soon shall come upon us. For a moment the eyes of Denethor glowed again as he faced Gandalf, and Pippin felt once more the strain between their wills. But now almost it seemed as if their glances were like blades from eye to eye, flickering as they fenced. Pippin trembled, fearing some dreadful stroke, but suddenly Denethor relaxed and grew cold again. He shrugged his shoulders. If you had, he said. Such words and ifs are vain. It has gone into the shadow, and only time will now show what doom awaits it and us. The time will not be long. In what is left, let all who fight the enemy in their fashion be at one, and keep hope while they may, and after hope still the hardihood to die free. He turned to Faramir. What think you of the garrison in Osgiliath? It is not strong, said Faramir. I have sent the company of Ithilien to strengthen it, as I have said. Not enough, I deem, said Denethor. It is there that the first blow will fall. They will have need of some stout captain there. There, and elsewhere in many places, said Faramir and sighed. Alas for my brother, whom I too loved, he rose. May I have your leave, father? And then he swayed and leaned upon his father's chair. You are weary, I see, said Denethor. You have ridden fast and far under shadow of evil in the air, I am told. Let us not speak of that, said Faramir. Then we will not, said Denethor. Go now and rest as you may. Tomorrow's need will be sterner. Hi there, kits. Just to talk about that briefly, because this is another little bit that I really like here. Denethor actually shows his restraint here. He is boiling over, angry, upset, disappointed. And then Gandalf, has the nerve to tell him, I don't trust you with it. I don't even trust myself with it. And he has this clarity where he says, you know what? All this talk is not helping. This isn't working for us. This is Sauron laughing at us, this fighting that we're doing. So, you know what? Let's just table that discussion for now. You think he lost the staring contest and changed the subject? I don't think it's that. Although there did seem to be a contest. But what's really interesting here is that he's backing down, but it's smart to do that. It's really smart to do that. And there's a lot of wisdom in backing down in this situation. And he says, you know what? We could talk about what would have happened or what could have happened, but that's not helpful. It's not constructive. And of course, he doesn't say, Faramir, I want you to go to Osgiliath and die, like he did in the movie. I mean, he didn't say that literally in the film, but that's what we were meant to believe. I know that sending you to Osgiliath is a suicide mission, and I'm going to send you there anyway because I don't like you. You know what I mean? And that's what happened in the film. Here, it's so different. It's so different. Instead, he's saying, they have need of a strong captain in Osgiliath because that's the choke point at the river. It's an important strategic point. Sauron's going to hit us hard there. And Faramir is like, I guess I'll go. And then Denethor even says, well, hold on. You need rest first. That's a tomorrow discussion. So I just so hate the version of him in the film because they got Denethor completely wrong. They got Faramir wrong too. But they got Denethor really, really wrong. Character assassination, what they did to him. And it's not the fault of John Noble, who played the character the way that it was written. It's the way that it was written. And like I said, I don't think it was malicious. I think it was just Peter Jackson reading this section. Hey, Sarah Save, how's it going? Peter Jackson reading this section, this chapter, and just misinterpreting it. I think he just thought of it in the wrong way. He thought of this whole thing between Denethor and Faramir as being more antagonistic than it really was. And then he leaned into it because it made good cinema. It made good cinema, and you get this moment where Gandalf says, your father loves you. He'll realize this before the end, And but he does love him. He loves both of his sons. He might be angry that things didn't go his way, but we have to think about all the things that he's lost. His wife died very young. His son now has died young. Boromir was only 41 years old. I'm older than Boromir. And he has had this fear of Gandalf his whole life. That Gandalf is going to put a puppet on the throne and he's going to take over Gondor. And now he's like, you know what? Even if he doesn't put his puppet on the throne, my other son is the biggest Gandalf fanboy in the Southlands, and he's going to do whatever Gandalf says for him to do. He's not going to listen to his old man. He's not going to take his advice. He's going to just do what this wizard tells him to do, you know. You think Peter Jackson wanted to create more drama? A lot of the choices that were made in the films were because Peter Jackson wanted to create more drama. So you love listening to people talk about lore they know a lot about. Well, thank you. As a matter of fact, Sarah, since we've just met recently, you probably don't know that I have a YouTube channel where I do nothing more than talk about Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, the Silmarillion, the Hobbit, and all that stuff. I'm gonna put the link in the chat for you there because you're on the Twitch side. I'm actually streaming to both locations right now. But I'm glad you're enjoying it. Let's continue here. All now took leave of the lord of the city and went to rest while they still could. Outside there was a starless blackness as Gandalf with Pippin beside him, bearing a small torch, made his way to their lodging. They did not speak until they were behind closed doors. Then at last Pippin took Gandalf's hand. "Tell me," he said, "is there any hope? For Frodo, I mean, or at least mostly for Frodo." Gandalf put his hand on Pippin's head. "There was never much hope," he answered. "Just a fool's hope, as I have been told. And when I heard of Cirith Ungol—" He broke off and strode to the window, as if his eyes could pierce the night of the east. "Cirith Ungol," he muttered. "Why that way, I wonder?" He turned. "Just now, Pippin, my heart almost failed me hearing that name. And yet, in truth, I believe that the news that Faramir brings has some hope in it, for it seems clear that our enemy has opened his war at last, and made the first move while Frodo was still free. So now for many days he will have his eye turned this way and that away from his own land. And yet, Pippin, I feel from afar of his haste and fear. He has begun sooner than he would. Something has happened to stir him." Gandalf stood for a moment in thought. "Maybe," he muttered. "Maybe even your foolishness helped, my lad. Let me see, some 5 days ago now, he would discover that we had thrown down Saruman, and had taken the stone. Still, what of that? We could not use it to much purpose, without his knowing— I wonder— Aragorn, his time draws near, and he is strong and stern underneath Pippin, bold, determined, able to take his own counsel and dare great risks at need. That may be it. He may have used the stone and shown himself to the enemy, challenging him, for this very purpose, I wonder. Well, we shall not know the answer till the riders of Rohan come, and if they do not come too late. There are evil days ahead, to sleep while we may." "But," said Pippin. "But what?" said Gandalf. "Only one but I will allow tonight." "Gollum," said Pippin. "How on earth could they be going on about with him, even following him? And I could see that Faramir did not like the place he was taking them to any more than you do. What is wrong?" "I cannot answer that now," said Gandalf. "Yet my heart guessed that Frodo and Gollum would meet before the end, for good or for evil. But of Cirith Ungol I will not speak tonight. Treachery. Treachery, I fear. Treachery of that miserable creature. But so it must be. Let us remember that a traitor may betray himself and do good that he does not intend. It can be so sometimes. Good night." Okay, let's pause for a moment. And I'm going to put it out there to the chat, to both chats, to my YouTube chat, my Twitch chat. Tell me, when he says these very prophetic words, "A traitor may betray himself and do good that he does not intend," who is he speaking of other than Gollum? Obviously, he's talking about Gollum. He fears that Gollum is bringing them to Cirith Ungol, which is, it means the cleft of the spider. If Frodo had taken his elvish lessons a little more seriously when Bilbo was teaching him, he would have known that it means the cleft of the spider. He fears that Gollum is bringing him there for some treachery, but he mentions, just not specifically only about this, but that this can happen. That a traitor may betray himself and do good that he does not intend. Can we think about an example of that happening in The Lord of the Rings? Either that has happened already or will happen coming forward. You remember people of Gondor had American accents and that the hobbits had British accents? Oh, you're speaking about the films. So it actually makes sense for everybody from the Shire to speak in a very provincial British accent because the Shire itself is based off of provincial England, with Hobbiton itself being Oxford. Now, Tolkien intended Gondor to be Italy. Boromir, no, not Boromir. Boromir's not a traitor. He had a passing madness because of the One Ring. Saruman is a better example, Moogle, but there's an even better example. Let's see if you guys can come up with it. If not, I'm just going to straight up tell you, so don't worry, you'll find out. But yeah, so he considered Gondor to be analogous to Italy. As a matter of fact, whenever Tolkien himself would travel to Italy, he would say that he was in Gondor. What's really cool about that, though, is obviously they speak the same common tongue as everybody else. I would not say that they had necessarily American accents, especially since there are just so many American accents. Denethor's not a traitor either. He's just someone who lost all of his hope. He lost his hope, he lost his faith, and he kind of just gave up. I'm talking more specifically about someone who really did practice treachery, who is a traitor. Sauron is indeed a traitor. Yeah, he's a traitor against the Valar, but that's not where I'm going. All right, I'll just tell you guys. We're talking about Grima Wormtongue. Grima Wormtongue is a traitor against Rohan. And what did he do? He threw the Palantir out of the window of Isengard's tower of Orthanc, and because of that, all these things are happening. So Gandalf saw this happen already, that a traitor could betray himself and do good that he did not intend, because he's like, well, how did this happen? What is going on? And he realizes, well, he gave the Palantir to Aragorn. He probably used it. He probably challenged Sauron. Oh, this is good. This is really good. We might have a chance here. Because Sauron's not going to be looking at his own area. He's going to be looking here and there and everywhere in Gondor because of something that Aragorn did, because of something that Pippin did, because of something that Wormtongue did. So that's the reference, guys. He is realizing that this all happened because of a traitor who betrayed himself. Now, you could apply that to even earlier to Gollum. You could apply it to a lot of things. You could apply it to Thorin. You could apply it to a lot of people. And this is a common theme that we see, that traitors are undone. The fall of Gondolin, it happened to Maeglin. You know, although I wouldn't say that he did good, but he got what he deserved, we'll say, right? Yeah, Wormtongue, exactly. Wormtongue throwing the Palantir, big moment. I said earlier, just a little while earlier, at the beginning of the stream, that one of the most important things to happen in Middle-earth history, and definitely top 3 most important things to happen in the Third Age specifically, was Pippin stealing the Palantir and looking into it. And that happened because of a traitor, because of Grima the Wormtongue. So there you have it. Oh, now Wasted Quake Ranger, we have to hold on a second. We have to talk about what you just said. Wasted Quake Ranger just said one of the most insightful things that you could say in this situation. You can see me pulling down a book. You can tell it's the Silmarillion. You just said, shall create a thing greater than he himself cannot understand. Who does that sound like? Hold on. Let's open up the Silmarillion. Let's go to the first chapter. Because, boy, that sounds like someone specifically, doesn't it? Then Iluvatar spoke, and he said, mighty are the Ainur, and mightiest among them is Melkor. But that he may know, and all the Ainur, that I am Iluvatar. Those things that ye have sung I will show them forth, that ye may see what ye have done. And thou, Melkor, shalt see that no theme may be played that hath not its uttermost source in me, nor can any alter the music in my despite. For he that attempteth this shall prove but mine instrument in the devising of things more wonderful which he himself hath not imagined. So, Iluvatar, God himself said the same thing, that a traitor can betray himself and do good that he has not even imagined. So, Gandalf is saying the same thing that God said, right? It makes sense. He's not only is he an angel, he's one of the most loyal ones. He's one of the most important of the Maiar. He's definitely one of the wisest ones. He has learned from several different Valar. Most of the Maiar, that is to say, the lesser angels, have decided to latch themselves onto one of the Valar. Whereas Gandalf, he flitted about. He learned from 4 of them. He learned from Varda. He learned from Manwë. He learned from Aule, and he learned from Nienna. And Nienna was the one that I think he was the most associated with. And it's very interesting. What is Nienna as one of these high angels, who the men would refer to as a goddess, although she's not? What is she associated with? Mercy and pity and patience and all these things. And then we have Gandalf, and yeah, he could be a little short-tempered at times. You know, he loses his cool sometimes, and sometimes he's not super patient. But these are the lessons that he learned from her. These are the lessons that he gave to Frodo. These are the reasons that Gollum is still alive at this point, and the reasons that the ring's going to get destroyed, because of patience and because of pity and because of mercy. All right, let's continue. We got pretty deep there, huh? Let's continue. The next day came with the morning like a brown dusk, and the hearts of men, lifted for a while by the return of Faramir, sank low again. The winged shadows were not seen again that day, yet ever and anon high above the city a faint cry would come, and many who heard it would stand stricken with a passing dread, while the less stout-hearted quailed and wept. And now Faramir was gone again. They gave him no rest, some murmured. The Lord drives his son too hard, and now he must do the duty for 2, for himself and for the one that will not return. And ever men looked northward, asking, where are the riders of Rohan? In truth, Faramir did not go by his own choosing, but the lord of the city was master of his council, and he was in no mood that day to bow to others. Early in the morning the council had been summoned. There all the captains judged that because of the threat in the south, their force was too weak to make any stroke of war on their own part, unless perchance the riders of Rohan yet should come. Meanwhile they must man the walls and wait. Yet, said Denethor, we should not lightly abandon the outer defences. The Rammus made with so great a labour, and the enemy must pay dearly for the crossing of the river. That he cannot do, and forced to assail the city, either north of Caer Andros because of his marshes, or southward toward Lebanon because of the breadth of the river. That needs many boats. It is at Osgiliath that he will put his weight, as before when Boromir denied him the passage. That was but a trial, said Faramir. Today we will make the enemy pay 10 times our loss for the passage, and yet rue the exchange, for he can afford to lose a host better than we to lose a company. And the retreat of those that we put out far afield will be perilous if he wins across in force. And what of Caer Andros? Said the prince. That too must be held if Osgiliath is defended. Let us not forget the danger on our left. The Rhaenyra may come, and they may not. But Faramir has told us of great strength drawing ever to the Black Gate. More than one host may issue from it, and strike for more than one passage. Now, I like this because this is the first time that Prince Imrahil actually has a line. Prince Imrahil is sort of like this really important character that appears at the end of the book. Like, we're in book 5 of 6 here. And this is, he only appeared a few chapters ago, and this is his first line. He's so important to the narrative, but he doesn't have a lot to do, and that's probably why he didn't make it into the movie. But I really like Prince Imrahil because he has connections to everybody, and it's sort of devastating to take him out of the story. So let me tell you some of those connections. So Prince Imrahil, we know, of course, he's the Prince of Dol Amroth, which is a part of Gondor. And what's interesting is that he had a sister, and that was Denethor's wife. So Denethor is actually his brother-in-law. So he's got his brother-in-law there with him. The other thing is that he has a daughter who is actually going to, at a later point, marry Éomer. So Éomer is going to be the king of Rohan. Of course, we know that. And his wife, the queen of Rohan, is going to be the princess of Dol Amroth. And of course, we get all these like great connections like that, like Faramir marrying Éowyn. So it's like the two countries, just sort of really becoming even more close-knit than they were before, with all these ties of marriage and of blood and everything. The Doctor says the same thing in Genesis of the Daleks. Some good resulted because the existence of the evil Daleks. So I guess I've actually never watched Doctor Who. I'm a little bit familiar with the mythology, but not really like very much so. But I think it's a common sort of moral stance to take, is that evil does serve a purpose, but it's really important that we don't accept evil, and that's something that Tolkien gets into in the Silmarillion, because Manwë has this moment where, some really terrible things have happened. Melkor has done, the worst things that he could do, and then he says, well, I guess in this moment we should remember the words that Ilúvatar said to us, that evil will wind up doing good. Without realizing it. And then Namo Mandos says, and yet remain evil. And that's really important. We can look at the silver linings of the clouds, but they're still clouds. We have to realize that. That's really important for Tolkien's morality, and for morality in general, I think. All right, let's continue. Let's see, that was right. Okay, that was Imrahil spoke. Here we are. Much must be risked in war, said Denethor. Caer Andros is manned, and no more can be sent so far. But I will not yield the river and the Pelennor unfought, not if there is a captain here who still has the courage to do his lord's will. Then all was silent, but at length Faramir said, I do not oppose your will, sire. Since you are robbed of Boromir, I will go ahead and do what I can in his stead, if you command it. I do so, said Denethor. Then farewell, said Faramir, but if I should return, think better of me. That depends on the matter of your return, said Denethor. Gandalf it was that spoke last to Faramir ere he rode east. Do not throw your life away rashly or in bitterness, he said. You will be needed here for other things than war. Your father loves you, Faramir, and will remember it ere the end. Farewell. So now the Lord Faramir had gone forth again, and had taken with him such strength of men as were willing to go or could be spared. On the walls some gazed through the gloom toward the ruined city, and they wondered what chanced there, for nothing could be seen, and others, as ever, looked north and counted the leagues to Theoden and Rohan. Will he come? Will he remember our old alliance, they said. Yes, he will come, said Gandalf, even if he comes too late, but think. At best the Red Arrow cannot have reached him more than 2 days ago, and the miles are long from Erebus. Now, of course, and I pointed this out earlier, it's really important to remember that the messengers that were sent to Rohan with the Red Arrow to ask them to aid Gondor did not make it back, that they were killed. So That's a big part of why Denethor's going to completely lose his mind and completely flip out. He's really going to think, "Oh my God, they're not coming." You know. Yep. Yeah, it's common in philosophy to point that out, that sometimes evil does good, or good does evil. But I just think it is important to remember we're being rated by a Scottish maiden. To remember that evil still is evil, because that's really important. And yes, he kept the dialogue as written. He didn't quite understand the vibe of it. Yeah, there's a lot of points in the Lord of the Rings movies. Now, Scottish Maiden, Alice is rating us on the Twitch side, bringing along a whole bunch of people. So welcome in, everybody. We are reading The Return of the King, and I'm doing Gandalf's voice for you now. Give it. Oh, you want me to do Gollum? Okay. Give it to us, raw and everything, my precious. How is it going, everybody? Hey there to Last Evros. We are on the 4th chapter of The Return of the King, which is the Siege of Gondor. You love me a bit of Smeagol, of course. Oh, Smeagol is nice, yes, precious. But we are, so it was brought up in the YouTube chat. Let me bring this up real quick. That a lot of the dialogue in the film, and I know Scottish Maiden, you're a big fan of the film, right? A lot of the dialogue in the film was exactly the same as it was in the book, and yet the entire vibe was way off. Now, when Gandalf said that, he said this exact line in the film. Do not throw away your life rashly or in bitterness. You will be needed here for other things than war. Your father loves you, Faramir, and will remember it in the end. Farewell. He's not saying don't go, because that's what he was saying in the movie. In the movie, he was saying don't go. In this, he's saying, I understand you have to go. Come back alive. We need you. It's very different. You just don't want the journey to end. You know, there's a lot more books. I'm just saying, wait until you get to this one. Wait, hold on. I got to hold this up for Scottish Maiden. Wait until you get to, oh, that's the wrong one. Hold on. I'm constantly doing this. Wait until you read this one. The Children of Hurin, you are going to just lose your mind about this one. This is his best book. And yeah, I really look forward to seeing what you have to say about that one. You know, we have multiple Alices. We have multiple Alices. That is the way it is. Evil is always evil. That is true, even when it does good. Because we read that passage earlier, right? Dos Fleur, we read that passage earlier where Iluvatar, God himself, said to Melkor, Satan himself, you're going to do good that you can't even realize. You're going to make things better and you don't even know it. That doesn't mean that he's not evil. That doesn't mean that everything that Melkor did was good. Everything that Melkor did was bad. Who is the one character that is beyond redemption? Who is the one character that can never be redeemed? Morgoth. Melkor. The devil himself. Even Sauron could find repentance. But not Morgoth. Not Morgoth. Redemption has to be sought. That's the big thing. Melkor, he made a mockery of it. We're going to have to talk about that way more in the future when we do the Silmarillion. Right now we're on the Return of the King. We're going to return to that. Thank you so much for the raid, Scottish Maiden. What were you playing today, out of curiosity? Were you on another Elder Scrolls, or were you on another Resident Evil? What was going on in your neck of the woods? Well, let's continue here. It was night again ere news came. A man rode in haste from the fords, saying that a host had issued from Minas Morgul, and was already drawing nigh to Osgiliath, and it had been joined by regiments from the south, Haradrim, cruel and tall. And we have learned, said the messenger, that the black captain leads them once again, and the fear of him is passed before him over the river. With those ill-boding words the 3rd day closed since Pippin came to Minas Tirith. Few went to rest, for small hope had now any even Faramir could hold the fords for long. You were playing horses. Wait, horses. Then the game was called Horses, and then you played Berry, Berry, Berry. Interesting. Sauron just wanted order. He wanted some kind of peace fundamentally. That is very true. That is very true. When Sauron was Myron, before his fall, he oh, Alice, I just asked that just when we're doing a Tolkien stream, just try to keep it PG-13 if you could. Liz. So if you could just do that. Moogle, could you just kill that one message? Just like I said, just because it has to go on YouTube. It's okay, you didn't know. But Moogle, if you can kill that one message, or if we could just scroll it off the screen rather quickly. But, all right, now I'm out of what I was saying here. Oh, that's right. So you were playing indie games. Okay, I was replying to Laugh Evros. When Sauron was Myron, he was what we would call a lord of order. He loved order. He hated chaos. And we think of that name, Myron. That was his name. What does it mean? It means admirable, or even, you would dare say, precious. And, of course, now he's known as Sauron. Sauron means the hated one, by the way, in case you were wondering. That's not his name. That's what the elves decided to call him when he started messing with them. He started to see everything as being chaotic. Freedom's chaotic. People are chaotic. We can't allow everybody, thank you, Moogle, to just go around doing whatever they want because it's just too much for me to handle. I can't keep track of it. And then he starts looking over at Melkor and saying, this guy's got a lot of power. This guy, he's making things happen. They might not be good things, but he's making things happen. And this was his road to hell, essentially. That's where he became Sauron, really. All right, let's continue. The next day, though the darkness had reached its full and grew no deeper, it weighed heavier on men's hearts, and a great dread was on them. Ill news came soon again. The passage of Anduin was won by the enemy. Faramir was retreating to the wall of the Pelennor, rallying his men to the causeway forts, but he was 10 times outnumbered. If he wins back at all across the Pelennor, his enemies will be on his heels, said the messenger. They have paid dear for his crossing, but less dearly than we hoped. The plan has been well laid. It is now seen that in secret they have long been building floats and barges in great number in East Osgiliath. They swarmed across like beetles. But it is the Black Captain that defeats us. Few will stand and abide even the rumor of his coming. His own folk quail at him, and they would slay themselves at his bidding. Then I am needed there more than here, said Gandalf, and rode off at once, and the glimmer of him faded soon from sight. Did you delete 2 messages? I only saw 1. Right. Moogle, I just said get rid of just the one thing. You don't have to delete everything. Just the one thing. You could stop. It's cool, man. It's cool. Let's continue. And all that night Pippin, alone and sleepless, stood upon the wall and gazed eastward. The bells of day had scarcely rung out again, a mockery in the unlightened dark, when far away he saw fires spring up across in the dim spaces where the walls of the Pelennor stood. The watchman cried aloud, and all the men in the city stood to arms. Now, ever and anon, there was a red flash, and slowly through the heavy air dull rumbles could be heard. They have taken the wall, men cried. They are blasting breaches in it. They are coming. Where is Faramir? Cried Beregond in dismay. Say not that he has fallen. It was Gandalf that brought the first tidings. With a handful of horsemen he came into the middle morning, riding in escort to a line of wains. They were filled with wounded men, all that could be saved from the wreck of the causeway forts. At once he went to Denethor. The lord of the city sat now in a high chamber above the hall of the White Tower, with Pippin at his side, and through the dim windows north and south and east he bent his dark eyes, as if to pierce the shadows of doom that ringed him round. Most to the north he looked, and he would pause at whiles to listen, as if by some ancient art his ears might hear the thunder of hoofs on the plains far away. "Is Faramir come?" he asked. "No," said Gandalf. "But he still lived when I left him. Yet he is resolved to stay with the rear guard, lest the retreat over the Pelennor become a rout. He may perhaps hold his men together long enough, but I doubt it. He is pitted against a foe too great, for one thing has come that I feared." "Not the Dark Lord?" cried Pippin, forgetting his place in his terror. Denethor laughed bitterly. "Nay, not yet, Master Peregrine. He will not come, save only to triumph over me when all is won. He uses others as his weapons. So do all great lords, if they are wise, Master Halfling. Or why should I sit here in my tower and think, and watch, and wait, spending even my sons? For I can still wield a brand." He stood up, and cast open his long black cloak, and behold, he was clad in mail beneath, and girt with a long sword, great hilted in a sheath of black and silver. Thank you for the follow. "Thus I have walked, and thus now for many years have I slept," he said, "lest with age the body should grow soft and timid. Yet now, under the Lord of Barad-dûr, the most fell of all his captains, is already master of your outer walls," said Gandalf. "King of Angmar long ago, sorcerer, ring-wraith, lord of the Nazgûl, a spear of terror in the hand of Sauron, shadow of despair." Thank you, Sarasave. Thank you very much. We'll be doing part 5, if you want to know, if you're still there, probably the 9th, the July 9th. I want to finish this before I talk about it. There's a lot to talk about here with what Denethor said, which is both true and both absolutely horrible at the same time. "Then, Mithrandir, you have a foe to match you," said Denethor. "For myself, I have long known who is the chief captain of the hosts of the Dark Tower. Is this all that you have returned to say? Or can it be that you have withdrawn because you are overmatched?" Pippin trembled, fearing that Gandalf would be stung to sudden wrath, but his fear was needless. "It might be so," Gandalf answered softly. "But our trial of strength has not yet come, and if words spoken of old be true, not by the hand of man shall he fall, and hidden from the wise is the doom that awaits him. However that may be, the captain of despair does not press forward yet. He rules rather according to the wisdom that you have just spoken, from the rear, driving his slaves in madness on before. Nay, I came rather to guard the hurt men that can yet be healed, for the Ramus is breached far and wide, and soon the host of Morgul will enter in many points. And I came chiefly to say this, soon there will be battle upon many points. And I came Soon there will be battle on the fields. A sortie must be made ready. Let it be of mounted men. In them lies our brief hope, for in one thing only is the enemy still poorly provided. He has few horsemen. And we also have few. Now, with the coming of Rohan, be in the nick of time, said Denethor. We are likely to see other newcomers first, said Gandalf. Fugitives from Caer Andros have already reached us. The isle has fallen. Another army has come from the Black Gate, crossing from the northeast. Some have accused you, Mithrandir, of delighting to bear ill news, said Denethor. But to me this is no longer news. It was known to me ere nightfall yesterday. As for the sortie, I have already given thought to it. Let us go down. Wield a brand. Well, when he says brand, you're right, Joe. You're absolutely right. That is foreshadowing. Absolutely. Of course, when he's saying brand, though, he's referring to a sword. Brand is also sort of an archaic term for sword. Tolkien is using it sort of in both ways. In the foreshadowing with it, you speak of and also speaking of a sword. Now, he says something very true, but also sort of really messed up. He says that leaders like the Witch King, they don't lead from the front, they lead from behind. And then he says, as all wise leaders do, you know. And he's saying, look, I'm sitting here in this tower, eating cherry tomatoes. That doesn't happen in the book, but just enjoying with you guys and everything. And I'm wearing armor, but, I'm not out there fighting. I have a sword, but I'm not using it. I've spent my sons. That's just how leaders are. But we see that there is a theme when it comes to leaders, especially war leaders, that the good ones, the great ones, are in the front of their army. The bad ones are in the back. When Theoden comes, is he in the front or is he in the back? Not only is he in the front, but he rides so swiftly that nobody could keep up with him. When Aragorn and Éomer, they're doing their pincer attack. Aragorn coming from the river and Éomer coming from the Pelennor. Are they behind their armies or are they in front of them? They're in front of them. And we see it with all the best characters, all the great heroes, they're in front of their armies. It's the cowardly ones who are behind, or even not even being there, like Saruman. Saruman sent a whole army to fight at Helm's Deep. He wasn't even there, much less behind his army. He was in his tower. He didn't even show up. Now, we could sort of forgive Denethor because he's actually wishing that he could fight. But not a lot of people talk about this, but the steward of Gondor is actually forbidden by law to go to war. And that's because that's what the king does. The steward is never allowed to leave the boundaries of Gondor. He's not allowed to fight. That's what the king is supposed to do. He's not the king. He's the steward. He's supposed to stay where he is. And him saying that that's the smart thing to do, it's the wise thing to do, is a little messed up. I think he's already very depressed at this point. He's been depressed for a long time. But he is wishing that he could go down there and fight. Otherwise, he wouldn't have that armor on him. He wouldn't be talking about how he can wield a brand and everything. Let us continue. We've still got a bit of this chapter to go, so we're going to probably have to pick it up a little bit here. Time passed. At length, watchers on the walls could see the retreat of the out-companies. Small bands of weary and often wounded men came first with little order. Some were running wildly as if pursued. Away to the eastward the distant fires flickered, and now it seemed that here and there they crept across the plain. Houses and barns were burning. Then from many points little rivers of red flame came hurrying on, winding through the gloom, converging toward the line of the broad road that led from the city gate to Osgiliath. The enemy, men muttered. The dike is down. Here they come pouring through the breaches, and they carry torches, it seems. Where are our own folk? It drew now to evening by the hour, and the light was so dim that even far-sighted men upon the citadel could discern little clearly out upon the fields, save only the burnings that ever multiplied, and the lines of fire that grew in length and sped. At last, less than a mile from the city, a more ordered mass of men came into view, marching, not running, still holding together. The watchers held their breath. Faramir must be here, they said. He can govern man and beast. He will make it yet. Now the main retreat was scarcely 2 furlongs distant. Out of the gloom behind a small company of horsemen galloped all that was left of the rear guard. Once again they turned at bay, facing the oncoming lines of fire, and suddenly they were in a tumult of fierce cries. Horsemen of the enemy swept up. The lines of fire became flowing torrents, file upon file of orcs bearing flame, and wild Southron men with red banners, shouting with harsh tongues, surging up, overtaking the retreat. And with a piercing cry, out of the dim sky fell the winged shadows, the Nazgul, stooping to the kill. The retreat became a rout. Already men were breaking away, flying wild and witless here and there, flinging away their weapons, crying out in fear, falling to the ground. And then a trumpet rang from the citadel, and Denethor at last released the sortie. Drawn up within the shadow of the gate, and under the looming walls outside, they had waited for his signal, all the mounted men that were left in the city. Now they sprang forward, formed, quickened to a gallop, and charged with a great shout. And from within the walls an answering shout went up, for foremost on the field rode the Swan Knights of Dol Amroth, with their prince in his blue banner at their head. Amroth for Gondor, they cried. Amroth to Faramir. Like thunder they broke upon the enemy of either flank of the retreat, but one rider outrun them all, swift as the wind in the grass. Shadowfax bore him shining, unveiled once more, a light starting from his upraised hand. The Nazgûl screeched and swept away, for their captain was not yet come to challenge the white fire of his foe. The hosts of Morgul, intent upon their prey, taken at unawares in wild career, broke, scattering like sparks in a gale. Then the out-companies with a great cheer turned and smote their pursuers. Hunters became the hunted. The retreat became an onslaught. The field was strewn with stricken orcs and men, and a reek arose of torches cast away, sputtering out in swirling smoke. The cavalry rode on. But Denethor did not permit them to go far. Though the enemy was checked and for the moment driven back, great forces were flowing in from the east. Again the trumpets rang, sounding the retreat. The cavalry of Gondor halted. Behind their screen the out-companies reformed. Now steadily they came marching back. They reached the gate of the city and entered, stepping proudly, and proudly the people of the city looked on them and cried their praise, and yet they were troubled in heart, for the companies were grievously reduced. Faramir had lost a third of his men, and where was he? Last of all he came. His men passed in, the mounted knights returned, and at their rear the banner of Dol Amroth and the prince, and in his arms before him on his horse he bore the body of his kinsman, Faramir, son of Denethor, found upon the stricken field. Faramir, Faramir, men cried, weeping in the streets. But he did not answer, and they bore him away up the winding road to the citadel and his father. Even as the Nazgûl had swerved aside from the onset of the White Rider, there came flying a deadly dart, and Faramir, as he held bay, a mounted champion of Harad, had fallen to the earth. Only the charge of Dol Amroth had saved him from the red Southland swords that would have hewed him as he lay. The Prince Imrahil brought Faramir to the White Tower, and he said, "Your son has returned, lord, after many great deeds." And he told all that he had seen. But Denethor rose and looked on the face of his son and was silent. Then he bade them make a bed in the chamber and lay Faramir upon it and depart. But he himself went up alone to the secret room under the summit of the tower, and many who looked up thither saw, at that time, a pale light that gleamed and flickered from the narrow windows for a while, and then flashed and went out. And when Denethor descended again, he went to Faramir and sat beside him without speaking. But the face of the Lord was grey, more deathlike than his son's. So that light that they saw was the Palantir. And now he's looked into it again, and he didn't like what he saw. He didn't like what he saw, and now he's really freaked out. Now, he looks even closer to death than his son does. Now, we have to talk about the movie, right? I love the movies. The movies are great and everything, but boy, they bungled this part, right? Like, leaving Imrahil out is such an error, right? It's amazing how small this scene is in the movie. There's no great retreat with all these orcs and everything follow them, and then all of the forces of the small but mighty Gondorian cavalry coming out. It was just Gandalf. Gandalf comes out, he shoots a few light beams, he brings in Faramir. There's no talk of, Faramir fighting on the field and all his bravery and everything, and then being fallen by one arrow at the end there. It looks like he was already shot by an arrow in Osgiliath, and his horse dragged him back. It was just so lame in the movie, and I love the movies, but this scene was so lame in the movie because they toned it down way. And what's interesting is that so many of the moments in the movies were exaggerated. They took something that didn't need to be big and they made it big, or something that already was big and they made it gargantuan. They made the moments even bigger. But in this moment, for whatever reason, Peter Jackson kept it so subtle and so small, and it's just like, wow, this is such a big moment in the book, and he made it less big, And Imrahil being the one to carry Faramir in, because as we went over earlier, that's his uncle. Imrahil is his uncle. We have to remember that Faramir's mother was this guy's sister. So it makes perfect sense for Imrahil to be the one to bring him in. Gandalf is sort of like a father figure to him, yes, but Imrahil is much more important to Faramir, and so yeah, like I said, the movie kind of bungled this whole section. There's a lot of parts that they did excellently, but this was bungled. So now at last the city was besieged, enclosed in a ring of foes. The Ramus was broken, and all the Pelennor abandoned to the enemy. The last word to come from outside the walls was brought by men flying down the northward road ere the gate was shut. They were the remnant of the guard that was kept at the point where the way from Anorian and Rohan ran into the townlands. Ingold led them, the same who had admitted Gandalf and Pippin less than 5 days before, while the sun still rose, and there was hope in the morning. There is no news of the Rohirrim, he said. Rohan will not come now, or if they come, it will not avail us. The new host that we had tidings of have come first. From over the river by way of Andros, it is said. They are strong, battalions of orcs of the eye, and countless companies of men of a new sort that we have not met before. Not tall, but broad and grim, bearded like dwarves, wielding great axes. Out of some savage land in the wide east they come, we deem. They hold the northward road, and many have passed on to Anorian, though Rohirrim cannot come. Really important to mention that those guys are what are known as oh, I actually forget the word. It's gonna pop up, and I'll point it out. It starts with a V, but they're from a land called Khand, which is right to the southeast of Mordor. Essentially, they're mercenaries that Sauron has hired. The gate was shut. All night watchmen on the walls heard the rumor of the enemy that roamed outside, burning field and tree, and hewing any man they found abroad, living or dead. The numbers that had already passed over the river could not be guessed in the darkness. But when morning or its dim shadow stole over the plain, it was seen that even fear by night had scarcely overcounted them. The plain was dark with their marching companies, and as far as eyes could strain in the murk, there sprouted like a foul fungus growth all about the beleaguered city great camps of tents, black or somber red. Busy as ants hurrying, orcs were digging lines of deep trenches in a huge ring, just out of bow shot from the walls, and as the trenches were made, each were filled with fire. Khan, yeah, no, well, Khand with a D, but yes, Khan. I see you put the D there at the end. That's funny. Yeah, I forget what they're actually called. It's a word that starts with a V. It essentially means mercenary. It'll come up. The word will pop up, I'm sure. Let's see. And as the trenches were made, each was filled with fire, though how it was kindled or fed by art or devilry none could see. All day the labour went forward, while the men of Minas Tirith looked on, unable to hinder it. And as each length of trench was completed, they could see great wains approaching, and soon yet more companies of the enemy were swiftly setting up, each behind the cover of a trench, great engines for the casting of missiles. There was none upon the city walls large enough to reach so far or to stay the work. At first men laughed and did not greatly fear such devices, for the main wall of the city was of great height and marvellous thickness, built ere the power anon craft of Numenor waned in exile. That should be end. Unfortunately, this new copy that I got has some weird sort of textural issues where there's letters that don't appear. Variags, there it is. Variags is the word that I was thinking of. I do remember that it started with a V. The Variags of Khan. That's who was being described there. And its outward face was like to the Tower of Orthanc, hard and dark and smooth, unconquerable by steel or fire, unbreakable except by some convulsion that would rend the very earth on which it stood. Nay, they said, not if the Nameless One himself should come, not even if he should enter here while yet we live. But some answered, while we yet live? How long? He has a weapon that has brought low many strong places since the world began. Hunger. The roads are cut. Rohan will not come. So, an excellent point is brought up. They're saying, hey, our walls are so powerful, nothing that Sauron can build is going to break them. And they're saying, hey, he's got a weapon better. He's got us under siege. And sieges, this one's not going to last very long because of Rohan. But sieges could last days. They could last weeks. They could last years. And essentially, the point of a siege is to starve your enemy out. Eventually, they're going to run out of food. But the engines did not waste shots upon the indomitable wall. It was no brigand or orc chieftain that ordered the assault upon the Lord of Mordor's greatest foe. A power and mind of malice guided it. As soon as the great catapults were set, with many yells and the creaking of rope and winch, they began to throw missiles marvelously high, so that they passed right above the battlement and fell thudding within the first circle of the city, and many of them, by some secret art, burst into flame as they came toppling down. Soon there was great peril of fire beyond the walls, and all who could be spared were busy quelling the flames that sprang up in many places. Then among the greater castes there fell another hail, less ruinous but more horrible. All about the streets and lanes behind the gate it tumbled down, small round shot that did not burn. But when men ran to learn what it might be, they cried aloud or wept, for the enemy was flinging into the city all the heads of those who had fallen fighting at Osgiliath, or on the Rammus, or in the fields. They were grim to look on, for though some were crushed and shapeless, and some had been cruelly hewn, yet many had features that could be told, and it seemed that they had died in pain, and all were branded with the foul token of the lidless eye. But marred and dishonoured as they were, it often chanced thus that a man would see again the face of someone that he had known, who had walked proudly once in arms, or tilled the fields, or ridden upon a holiday from the green vales in the hills. In vain men shook their fists at the pitiless foes that swarmed before the gate. Curses they heeded not, nor understood the tongues of western men, crying with harsh voices like beast and carrion birds. But soon there were few left in Minas Tirith who had the heart to stand up and defy the hosts of Mordor. For yet another weapon swifter than hunger the Lord of the Dark Tower had, dread and despair. The Nazgul came again, and as their dark lord now grew and put forth his strength, so their voices, which uttered only his will and his malice, were filled with evil and horror. Ever they circled above the city, like vultures that expect their fill of doomed men's flesh. Out of sight and shot they flew, and yet were ever present, and their deadly voices rent the air. More unbearable they became, not less at each new cry. At length even the stout-hearted would fling themselves to the ground as the hidden menace passed over them, or they would stand, letting their weapons fall from nerveless hands, while into their minds a blackness came, and they thought no more of war, but only of hiding, and of crawling, and of death. During all this black day, Faramir laid upon his bed in the chamber of the White Tower, wandering in a desperate fever, dying, someone said, and soon dying all men were saying upon the walls and in the streets. And by him his father sat and said nothing, but watched and gave no longer any heed to the defence. No hours so dark had Pippin known, not even in the clutches of the Uruk-hai. It was his duty to wait upon the Lord, and wait he did, forgotten it seemed, standing by the door of the unlit chamber, mastering his own fears as best he could. And as he watched, it seemed to him that Denethor grew old before his eyes, as if something had snapped in his proud will, and his stern mind was overthrown. Grief maybe had wrought it, and remorse. He saw tears on that once tearless face, more unbearable than wrath. "Do not weep, Lord," he stammered. "Perhaps he will get well. Have you asked Gandalf?" "Comfort me not with wizards," said Denethor. "The fool's hope has failed, the enemy has found it, and now his power waxes. He sees our very thoughts, and all we do is ruin us. I sent my own son forth, unthanked, unblessed, out into the needless peril, and here he lies with poison in his veins. Nay, whatever may now betide in war, my line too is ending. Even the house of the stewards has failed. Mean folk shall rule the last remnant of the kings of men, lurking in the hills until all are hounded out." Men came to the door crying for the lord of the city. "Nay, I will not come down," he said. "I must stay beside my son. He might still speak before the end, but that is near. Follow whom you will, even the grey fool, though his hope has failed. Here I stay." You think that's the most gruesome bit in the story? Absolutely, 100%. It's definitely, I wouldn't say it's the darkest thing because we talked about that, but it's definitely the most gruesome bit. And I mean, there's a part in the appendix that's kind of like that. Thank you for the follow. when they talk about the Battle of Anusabil with Azog, the Defiler, and Azog was a pretty nasty person himself, even as far as orcs go. And Azog did some messed up things. Not on this scale, though. Like, this is really bad. Like, not only are they taking everybody's heads that died and flinging them over the walls, but a lot of them have been crushed and ruined, and they're all branded with the mark of Mordor. It's terrible stuff that's happening. Oh, absolutely the most gruesome part of the book, I think. All right, but let's continue. Like I said, I've been trying to sort of pick up the pace. We only have like few pages left here, so let's try and get this chapter done. So it was that Gandalf took command of the last defense of the city of Gondor. Wherever he came, men's hearts would lift again, and the winged shadows pass from memory. Tirelessly he strode from citadel to gate, from north to south about the wall, and with him went the Prince of Dol Amroth in his shining mail, for he and his knights still held themselves like lords in whom the race of Númenor ran true. Men that saw him whispered, saying, "Like the old tales speak well, there is elvish blood in the veins of that folk, for the people of Nimrodel dwell in that land once long ago." And then one would sing amidst the gloom some staves of the Lay of Nimrodel, or other songs of the Vale of Anduin out of vanished years. We'll talk about Prince Imrahil's elvish ancestry more in a later time. He's one of the most interesting characters to me, and I do want to talk about that, but we're going to talk about it more when Legolas meets him, because Legolas sort of corroborates the story, so we'll talk about it more then. But here we're seeing everybody's like, you know what? Yeah, he is a little bit elf, isn't he? They're seeing in him the true Númenorian that they see in Faramir too. Faramir's true Númenorian, Aragorn's true Númenorian, but so is Imrahil, which, like I said, such a shame they left him out of the films. And yet, when they had gone, the shadows closed on men again, and their hearts went cold, and the valor of Gondor withered into ash. And so slowly they passed out of a dim day of fears into the darkness of desperate night. Fires now raged unchecked in the first circle of the city, and the garrison upon the outer wall was already in many places cut off from retreat. But the faithful who remained there at their posts were few. Most had fled beyond the second gate. Far behind the battle the river had swiftly bridged, and all day more force and gear of war had poured across. Now at last in the middle night the assault was loosed. The vanguard passed through the trenches of fire by many devious paths that had been left before them. On they came, reckless of their loss as they approached, still bunched and herded within the range of bowmen on the wall. But indeed there were too few now left there to do them great damage, though the light of fires showed up in many a mark for archers of such skill as Gondor once had boasted. Then, perceiving that the valor of the city was already beaten down, the hidden captain put forth his strength. Slowly the great siege towers built in Osgiliath rolled forward through the dark. Messengers came again to the chamber in the White Tower, and Pippin let them enter, for they were urgent. Denethor turned his head slowly from Faramir's face, and looked at them silently. "The first circle of the city is burning, lord," they said. "What are your commands? You are still lord and steward. Not all will follow Mithrandir. Men are flying from the walls and leaving them unmanned." "Why? Why do the fools fly?" said Denethor. "Better to burn sooner than late, for burn we must. Go back to your bonfire, and I will now go to my pyre. To my pyre! No tomb for Denethor and Faramir, no tomb. No long, slow sleep of death embalmed. We will burn like heathen kings before ever a ship sailed hither from the west. The west has failed. Go back and burn." Would he be considered a half-elf in Dungeons and Dragons term? No. Half-elf is a very specific sort of thing in Tolkien's universe. Elrond is a half-elf. His children are half-elves. But what Imrahil is he is a man who just happens to have a little bit of elvish ancestry way back. Aragorn is the same. He has a little bit of elvish ancestry way back as well. So he's not a half-elf, no. The messengers without bow or master turned and fled. Now Denethor stood up and released the fevered hand of Faramir that he had held. He is burning. Already burning, he said sadly. The house of his spirit crumbles. Then stepping softly toward Pippin, he looked down at him. Farewell, he said. Farewell, Peregrine, son of Paladin. Your service has been short, and now it is drawing to an end. I release you from the little that remains. Go now and die in what way seems best to you, and with whom you will, even that friend whose folly brought you to this death. Send for my servants, and then go. Farewell. I will not say farewell, my lord, said Pippin, kneeling. And then suddenly, hobbit-like once more, he stood up and looked the old man in the eyes. I will take your leave, sir, he said, for I want to see Gandalf very much indeed. But he is no fool, and I will not think of dying until he despairs of life. But from my word and your service, I do not wish to be released while you live. And if they come at last to the citadel, I hope to be here and stand beside you and earn perhaps the arms that you have given me. Do as you will, Master Halfling, said Denethor. But my life is broken. Send for my servants. He turned back to Faramir. Pippin left him and called for the servants, and they came. 6 men of the household, strong and fair, yet they trembled at the summons. But in a quiet voice Denethor bade him lay warm coverlets on Faramir's bed and take it up. And they did so, and lifting up the bed they bore it from the chamber. Slowly they paced, to trouble the fevered man as little as they might be. And Denethor, now bending on a staff, followed them, and last came Pippin. Out from the white tower they walked as if to a funeral. Out into the darkness where the overhanging cloud was lit beneath with flickers of dull red. Softly they paced the great courtyard, and at a word from Denethor halted beside the withered tree. All was silent save for the rumor of war in the city down below, and they heard the water dripping sadly from the dead branches into the dark pool. Then they went on through the citadel gate, where the sentinels stared at them in wonder and dismay as they passed by. Turning westward, they came at length to a door in the rearward wall of the 6th circle. Fen Hollin it was called, for it was kept ever shut, save at times of funeral, and only the lord of the city might use that way, or those who bore the token of the tombs and tended the houses of the dead. Beyond it went a winding road that descended in many curves down to the narrow land under the shadow of Mindorluin's precipice, where stood the mansions of the dead kings and of their stewards. Absolutely. 100% agree. One of Pippin's finest moments, I think. A porter sat in the little house beside the way, and with fear in his eyes he came forth bearing a lantern in his hand. At the Lord's command he unlocked the door, and silently it swung back, and as they passed through, taking the lantern from his hand, it was dark on the climbing road between ancient walls and many pillared balusters looming in the swaying lantern beam. Their slow feet echoed as they walked down, until at last they came to the silent street Rathdynen. Between pale domes and empty halls and images of men long dead, and they entered into the house of the stewards and set down their burden. There Pippin, staring uneasily about him, saw that he was in a wide vaulted chamber, draped as it were with the great shadows that the little lantern threw upon its shrouded walls. And dimly to be seen were many rows of tables carved of marble, and upon each table lay a sleeping form, hands folded, head pillowed upon stone. But one table near at hand stood broad and bare. Upon it, at a sign from Denethor, they laid Faramir and his father side by side, and covered them with one covering, and stood then with bowed heads as mourners beside a bed of death. Then Denethor spoke in a low voice. Here we will wait, but send not for the embalmers. Bring wood quick to burn, and lay it all about us and beneath, and pour oil upon it. And when I bid you thrust in a torch, do this and speak no more to me. Farewell. By your leave, lord, said Pippin, and turned and fled in terror from the deathly house. Poor Faramir, he thought. I must find Gandalf. Poor Faramir. Quite likely he needs medicine more than tears. Or where can I find Gandalf? In the thick of things, I suppose, and he will have no time to spare for dying men or madmen. At the door he turned to one of the servants who had remained on guard there. Your master is not himself, he said. Go slow. Bring no fire to this place where Faramir lives. Do nothing until Gandalf comes. Who is the master of Minas Tirith? The man answered. The Lord Denethor or the Grey Wanderer? The Grey Wanderer or no one, it would seem, said Pippin. And he sped back and up the winding way as swiftly as his feet would carry him, past the astonished porter, out through the door and on, till he came near to the gate of the citadel. The sentinel hailed him as he went by, and he recognized the voice of Beregond. "Whither do you run, Master Peregrine?" he cried. "To find Mithrandir," Pippin answered. "The Lord's errands are urgent and should not be hindered by me," said Beregond. "But tell me quickly, if you may, what goes forward. Whither has my lord gone? I have just come on duty, but I heard that he passed toward the closed door, and men were bearing Faramir before him." "Yes," said Pippin, "to the silent street." Beregond bowed his head to hide his tears. "They said that he was dying," he sighed, "and now he is dead." "No," said Pippin, "not yet. And even now his death might be prevented, I think. But the lord of the city, Beregond, has fallen before his city is taken. He is fey and dangerous." Quickly he told of Denethor's strange words and deeds. "I must find Gandalf at once." "Then you must go down to the battle." "I know. The Lord has given me leave, but Beregond, if you can, do something to stop anything dreadful from happening. The Lord does not permit those who wear the black and silver to leave their post for any cause, save at his own command." "Well, you must choose between orders and the life of Faramir," said Pippin. "And as for orders, I think you have a madman to deal with, not a lord. I must run. I will return if I can." He ran on, down toward the outer city. Men flying back from the burning passed him, and some, seeing his livery, turned and shouted, but he paid no heed. At last he was through the second gate, beyond which great fires leaped up between the walls. Yet it seemed strangely silent. No noise or shouts of battle or din of arms could be heard. Then suddenly there was a dreadful cry and a great shock, and a deep echoing boom. Forcing himself on against a gust of fear and horror that shook him almost to his knees, Pippin turned a corner, opening on the wide place behind the city gate. He stopped dead. He had found Gandalf, but he shrank back, cowering into a shadow. I have to pause here. Not because I need to talk about any of that, because it's all pretty straightforward stuff. A lot of the stuff that we could say, we'll say at a different time, like about Imrahil and such, but we're coming to what I think the best passage in all of the Lord of the Rings is the one that always gives me goosebumps. This is, yeah, speaking simple Hobbit sense to Beregond, right? You know, it's just like, you know, I think any of the hobbits would have done the same. Sam might have punched him. You know, I think Sam might have punched him to get some sense into him, maybe a little faster. But saying, hey, you know, I know you have orders to follow, but you got a choice to make here, man. All right, here we go. This is like one of the most amazing sections that Tolkien wrote in this book. "Ever since the middle nigh, the great assault had gone on. The drums rolled. To the north and to the south, company upon company of the enemy pressed to the walls. There came great beasts like moving houses in the red and fitful light, the Mumakil of the Harad, dragging through the lanes amid the fire huge towers and engines, yet their captain cared not greatly for what they did, or how they might be slain. Their purpose was only to test the strength and the defense, and to keep the men of Gondor busy in many places. It was against the gate that he would throw his heaviest weight. Very strong it might be, wrought of steel and iron, and guarded with towers and bastions of indomitable stone. Yet it was the key, the weakest point in all that high and impenetrable wall. The drums rolled louder. Fires leaped up. Great engines crawled across the field, and in the midst was a huge ram, great as a forest tree 100 feet in length, swinging on mighty chains. Long had it been forging in the dark smithies of Mordor, and its hideous head, founded of black steel, was shaped in the likeness of a ravening wolf. On it spells of ruin lay. Grond they named it, in memory of the hammer of the underworld of old. Great beasts drew it, orcs surrounded it, and behind walked mountain trolls to wield it. But about that gate resistance still was stout, and there the knights of Dol Amroth and the hardiest of the garrison stood at bay. Shot and dart fell thick, siege towers crashed or blazed suddenly like torches. All before the walls on either side of the gate the ground was choked with wreck and with bodies of the slain. Yet still driven as by a madness, more and more came up. Grond crawled on. Upon its housing no fire would catch, and though now and again some great beast that hauled it would go mad and spread stamping ruin among the orcs, innumerable that guarded it, their bodies were cast aside from its path, and others took their place. Grond crawled on. The drums rolled wildly. Over the hills of slain a hideous shape appeared, a horseman, tall, hooded, cloaked in black. Slowly, trampling the fallen, he rode forth, heeding no danger, no longer any dart. He halted and held up a long, pale sword. And as he did so, great fear was fell on all, defender and foe alike, and the hands of men drooped to their sides, and no bow sang. For a moment all was still. The drums rolled and rattled. With a vast rush, Grond was hurled forward by huge hands. It reached the gate. It swung. A deep boom rumbled through the city like thunder running in the clouds. But the doors of iron and posts of steel withstood the stroke. Then the black captain rose in his stirrups and cried aloud in a dreadful voice, speaking in some forgotten tongue, words of power and terror to rend both heart and stone. Thrice he cried. Thrice the great ram boomed, and suddenly upon the last stroke the gate of Gondor broke. As if stricken by some blasting spell, it burst asunder. There was a flash of great, searing lightning, and the doors tumbled in riven fragments in the ground. In rode the In rode the Lord of the Nazgul. A great black shape against the fires beyond he loomed up, grown to a vast menace of despair. In rode the Lord of the Nazgul under the archway that no enemy ever yet had passed, and all fled before his face. All save one. There, waiting, silent and still in the space before the gate, sat Gandalf upon Shadowfax. Shadowfax, who alone among the free horses of the earth endured the terror unmoving, steadfast as a graven image in Rath Dynan. "You cannot enter here," said Gandalf, and the huge shadow halted. "Go back to the abyss prepared for you. Go back. Fall into the nothingness that awaits you and your master. Go." The black rider flung back his hood, and behold, he had a kingly crown, and yet upon no head visible was it set. The red fires shone between it and the mantled shoulders, vast and dark. From a mouth unseen there came a deadly laughter. "Old fool," he said. "Old fool, this is my hour. Do you not know death when you see it? Die now and curse in vain." And with that he lifted high his sword, and flames ran down the blade. Gandalf did not move, and in that very moment, away behind in some courtyard of the city, a cock crowed. Shrill and clear he crowed, recking nothing of wizardry or war, welcoming only the morning that in the sky far above the shadows of death was coming with the dawn. And as if in answer there came from far away another note. Horns, horns, horns. In dark Mindolluin's sides they dimly echoed, great horns of the north wildly blowing. Rohan had come at last. And what a way to end a chapter. What a way to end a chapter. Now, even if I had the inclination to continue, and it's already past 10 where I am, but even if I had the inclination to continue, the next chapter, thank you, Lestevros, the next chapter, The Ride of the Rohirrim, goes a little bit back and follows Merry and Durnhelm, and it's not going to immediately pick up there. You know, awesome. Isn't that like the best part of the book? Isn't that the best part? I love that part. I think it's the best part of the whole book. It's not the most important part, but it's the best. Let's talk about Grond. I'm going to put the book up here because we're done with it. But let's talk about Grond. It was mentioned that it was named for the hammer of the underworld. Now, there's not a lot of lore about Grond, unfortunately, the original Grond. I'm gonna bring out the Silmarillion, and I'm gonna go to the one part that Grond is mentioned. I'm gonna read you that part. And then I'm gonna talk a little bit about what the word means. So let's see. I gotta find the right chapter here. Of Maeglin, coming a man into the west. Rune of Beleriand. Oh, that's Baron and Luthien. Okay, fifth battle. Durin Tarambar. Rune of Doriath. Tur and the Fall of Gondolin. Voyage of Arundel. All right, I gotta find it. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. I just gotta find the chapter. I think I had gone too far. Valdemar, the Flight of the Noldor. All right, this is more like it. Of the Sindar, that's not it. The Sun and the Moon, that's not it. Of Men, that's not it. Turn of the Noldor. Beleriand and its realms. Doran Beleriand. Hold on. I will find it. I'll just get my PDF copy. And I'll search there. I'm gonna read from the book, but I don't remember what chapter it's in. That's the problem. Off the top of my head, it's not coming to me. Alright, there's the Silmarillion. Just search for the word Grand. Grand. Here we are. And this chapter is what? Of the Rune of Beleriand and the Fall of Fingolfin. Why did I not see that when I was going through it? If I'd seen the Fall of Fingolfin, I would have been like, oh, there it is. Alright, I have it. 141. Probably because on the header it just says Rune of Beleriand. It doesn't say the Fall of Fingolfin. That is the full title. Why did Gandalf not cast a door-holding spell to save the gate? Probably because the last time he tried that spell, there was a giant explosion and he nearly died. I think he was done with door-holding spells, right? After that bit. Remember when he went tumbling down the stairs in Moria? Just have to find the exact page that we're on here. Here it is. All right. Now news came to Hithlum that Dorthonion was lost and the sons of Finarfin overthrown, and that the sons of Feanor were driven from their lands. Then Fingolfin beheld, as it seemed to him, the utter ruin of the Noldor, and the defeat beyond redress of all their houses, and filled with wrath and despair he mounted upon Rochalor his great horse, and rode forth alone, and none might restrain him. He passed over Dornu Fauglith like a wind amidst the dust, and all that beheld his onset fled in amaze, thinking that Oroma himself was come, for a great madness of rage was upon him, so that his eyes shone like the eyes of the Valar. Thus he came alone to Angban's gates, and he sounded his horn, and smote once upon the brazen doors, and challenged Morgoth to come forth to single combat, and Morgoth came. That was the last time in those wars that he passed the doors of his stronghold, and it is said that he took not the challenge willingly. For though his might was greatest in all things in this world, alone of the Valar he knew fear. But he could not now deny the challenge before the face of his captains, for the rocks rang with the shrill music of Fingolfin's horn, and his voice came keen and clear down into the depths of Angband. And Fingolfin named Morgoth Craven and Lord of Slaves. Therefore Morgoth came, climbing slowly from his subterranean throne. And the rumor of his feet was like thunder underground. And he issued forth, clad in black armor. And he stood before the king like a tower, iron-crowned, and his vast shield, sable unblazoned, cast a shadow over him like a storm cloud. But Fingolfin gleamed beneath it like as a star, for his mail was overlaid with silver, and his blue shield was set with crystals, and he drew his sword Ringle that glittered like ice. Then Morgoth hurled aloft Grond, the hammer of the underworld, and swung it down like a bolt of thunder. But Fingolfin sprang aside, and Grond rent mighty pit in the earth, whence smoke and fire darted. Many times Morgoth essayed to smite him, and each time Fingolfin leaped away as lightning shoots from under a dark cloud, and he wounded Morgoth with 7 wounds, and 7 times Morgoth gave a cry of anguish. Whereat the hosts of Angband fell upon their faces in dismay, and the cries echoed in the Northlands. But at the last the king grew weary, and Morgoth bore down his shield upon him. Thrice he was crushed to his knees, and thrice arose again, and bore up his broken shield and stricken helm. But the earth was all rent and pitted about him, and he stumbled and fell backward before the feet of Morgoth. And Morgoth set his left foot upon his neck, and the weight of it was like a fallen hill. Yet, with his last and desperate stroke, Fingolfin hewed the foot with Ringle, and blood gushed forth black and smoking, and filled the pits of Grond. Thus died Fingolfin, high king of the Noldor, most proud and valiant of the elven kings of old. I could go on, but I won't. Exactly. Now, what does the word Grond mean in Elvish? It means heavy. And that's something that you would say, oh, that makes a lot of sense, right? Heavy. Now we think of Morgoth. He's this giant, towering, devil in the form of a Dark Lord in all black armor. He's huge. He's the size of a tower. Good estimations of his size would put him at about 30 feet tall. So for him to have a hammer that big, that a 30-foot giant would wield, and that would come down and make holes in the earth so big that fire would come up out of them and smoke and sparks, this weapon must have been incredibly heavy. However, the usage of the word Grond is not heavy as in something that weighs a lot, but heavy as in something that is deeply ponderous, something that causes us to think, things that make you go, heavy thoughts. Why would he name it that? That's ridiculous, right? I have always held that this is a pun that Melkor made, because every time he kills an elf with this, he's sending them back to Mando. He's sending them to the Undying Lands. They're going to Mandos. He knows the elves don't die, He knows that their bodies could be broken apart and stricken with horrible wounds. And these bodies, which the elves call Hroar, could become unsuitable hosts for their souls, which they call Fear. And thus, their soul, their Fear, or Feia is the singular, would go to Mandos and eventually get a new body and be reincarnated and be born, not born, but walk the land again, to be reincarnated, to be bound to flesh again. The literal meaning of reincarnation. So what's the deal, right? So why would he call it that? So he's saying this is a lesson. Here's something to think about. Wham, you're dead. You're going to sit in Mandos for a few decades and think about how you dared to go against the Lord of Middle-earth. That's what he's really meaning. At least in my estimation, that's the way that I've always held it, right? That Grond. So, and now of course Sauron has his own Grond. It's not a hammer, it's not a war hammer. It's a battering ram, with a head shaped like a wolf. The wolf motif is extremely Sauron. Sauron, one of his favorite forms was of a wolf. If you guys were at the play when we did that, of course you would have heard about that a bit in the story of Beren and Luthien. And of course cast with spells of Vern. But what's really interesting was that this Grond, Sauron's Grond, is smacking the wall. It's not breaking it. The walls are resolute. The gate is standing up to this battering just fine. But then the Witch King starts speaking in some dead tongue, some forgotten language, and he's casting all sorts of spells, and then suddenly it breaks. So we can see that this Grond is a little less about this weapon can strike anything and absolutely demolish it, and that'll really make you think about what you're doing. In this case, it's all about magic. It's a magical implement. It's sorceress, you know. It's Morgul, is what the elves call it, you know. But I always thought that that's sort of like Grond calling a hammer that weighty, not weighty as in heavy. Yeah, the big bonk stick. Yeah, exactly, the Wabbajack. But as in, I'm gonna teach you a lesson, and you're gonna have to go into timeout and think about, you know, your rebellion against me, you know, because he's Morgoth. He called himself the Lord of the World, the Lord of Middle Earth at least, right? But he really wanted to be the Lord of all the world. He wanted to be king of the world. He wanted to be God, you know. He wanted people to think of him as God. And we see that he does his absolute worst, you know. Now looking it up now, Old English Grond, or ground is the earth's surface. Yeah, that is the root of the word ground. That's not, you know, obviously what Tolkien was doing, although I'm sure it's on purpose. Joe, I'm sure it's on purpose. He was going by Elvish. I'll give you the Elvish etymology in just a moment. Let me just bring up my Elvish dictionary real quick. We'll talk about it. I have time to do this, right? Why not? I'll give you the whole etymology if it'll ever work. I've studied this quite a bit, actually. The whole idea of Grond. The Grond is Sindarin, which is the language that is spoken the most in Middle Earth from the elves. It means weighty or ponderous. Now I'm looking for the etymology. Did he not do a Quendian form of it? Ah, here it is. So it's derived from gron, which itself is derived from ron, which means solid, tangible, or firm. So that became gron, which is more weighty and ponderous, and then that became grond later on. So he did have a Quendian form. But the similarity to Old English is interesting because the language of Old English, we see that represented as the Rohan language, the Rohanese, which itself is a derivation of the first language that men created, which they adapted from several sources, some of which were the Avari elves, the early ones that would have still spoken Quendian, but also the dwarves who taught them some of their language as well, you know. So it's just really interesting. And then, you know, you get these older sort of derivations like grod, which is like a cavern, and rud, which is an artificial cavern, you know, and rond, which is a roof, a domed roof, you know. And then there's gron with two N's, which became the more common way of saying something that is very weighty and ponderous, more as an adjective, you know, saying that's very gron, for example. Oh, that's giving me some gron thoughts, you know. So, I mean, Elvish is actually really fascinating. I would hardly recommend, if anybody has access to it, to read the Parfithelians and whatnot. But anyway, guys, let's come over to here because we're going to be ending. We had a lot of fun today. Like I said, next time we're going to the Ride of the Rohirrim, one of the most exciting chapters. It's not a very long chapter, so we might do more than one. We'll see how it goes next time. I'm going to go over the schedule. For those of you that are watching on Twitch, you guys know I stream every day. So tomorrow will be Dragon Quest 7, of course, tomorrow afternoon. Saturday night, more of Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Sunday night, we'll hopefully finish up Mega Man ZX. Monday afternoon, Street Fighter 6. Tuesday night, Hollow Knight Silk Song. Wednesday afternoon, Sea of Stars is DLC. And then Thursday night, a week from today, the List Critics. If you're watching on YouTube, however, you're wondering when's the next Tolkien stream. That's going to be in 2 weeks on the 2nd. July 2nd, we'll be doing the Council of Tolkien. Me and Matt will be there. I'm hoping that Sid will be there, but I haven't heard from him recently, and I know he's had some health challenges recently. He was posting on Quora as recently as Saturday, so I know he's probably not in the hospital anymore, but we'll see how that goes. Thank you for the follow. And then the 9th, we'll return with more of the Return of the King. We have a lot of Thursdays in July, so we could play a little catch-up because I missed out on last week's stream. I was sick. But the 9th, we'll do the Return of the King. The 16th, we'll play that lovely Two Towers game for Game Boy. And then the 23rd, we'll do more Return of the King. So keep that in mind that as of now, the plan is to have 2 reading streams in July. One on the 9th and the other on the 23rd. That being said, for those of you watching on YouTube, the stream is about to end. For those of you watching on Twitch, we're going to do a raid. Let's see who we could raid. We got raided because of Scottish Maiden coming in here. But let's see. We are not the raider. We are not the raidee. We were the raidee. We're going to be the raider. Who are we going to raid? There's a lot of people on to choose from. Let's see. I'm kind of thinking it's going to be Sleepyhead Dre.
So Raiders, I am sick, so if I sound crunchy...
He's not feeling too well, so we're going to hopefully cheer him up a bit. He's playing Wee Slop. I don't know exactly what game right now, but yeah. Thank you, Joe Quake. Thank you for everyone that came by. I know a lot of you were lurking. That's perfectly fine. We got a lot of people in here. We had over 40 people in here at one point, which is really, really cool. At least when I looked, there might have been points where it was higher than that. But we're going to raid Dre. He's actually not feeling well today. So let's, for those of you that are watching on Twitch, let's hopefully make him feel a little better. Sleepyhead Dre. Let's see. Just going to make it simple. Okay, guys, so for those of you on Twitch, copy that, paste it. I want to know what this game is that he's playing. It looks terrible. Copy that, paste it as we head into Dre's stream. He's just playing some slop on the Wii, some shovelware, because he's not feeling well today. For those of you on YouTube, thank you for coming by. Consider a membership. It helps me out. Thank you for those of you that followed on Twitch. Thank you to those that subscribed on YouTube. That is all very helpful, and thank you very much. Here we go. Good night. My Gavanin. Melone.